Okay, so this is a strange concept, but this video is what if Naruto didn't need sleep. Basically, instead of the normal 16 hours of useful time in a day, or really 14 hours in Naruto's case, he actually has the full 24 hours. This extra time could change Naruto's strength or even his whole personality. More importantly, how did he get this power? But to find that out, you'll have to continue watching the video. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy the video, and leave a comment on other what-if concepts you'd like to see. So without further ado, let's get into the video. It's a cold winter's night, and a 9-year-old Naruto is wandering the streets. How lonely it was. At least when it was daytime, the villagers would interact with him even if it wasn't in a positive manner. How long had it been since he slept last? 3. No, for years, he thought. Ever since he met the demon within him. The snow didn't fall so much as drift, lazy flakes spinning down through the lantern light, and melting the moment they touched stone. Naruto's sandals scuffed along the empty road, his breath coming out in little clouds that vanished as quickly as people did when they saw him in the day. Night was worse. In the day, someone might shout at him, throw something, slam a door. It hurt, but it meant he existed to them. At night, the village simply forgot him. He paused beneath an awning where the wind couldn't bite as hard, rubbing his hands together until they stung. His stomach was hollow, but it was a familiar kind of hollow, like everything else. Hunger, cold, silence. The only thing that wasn't familiar was the fact that none of it made him sleepy. He could remember what sleepiness used to feel like. Heavy eyes, warmth spreading through his limbs, the sweet surrender of not having to be anything for a while. Now he could lie down on a bed, on the floor, on a rooftop under the stars, and it never came. He would close his eyes and wait for the dark to take him, and right as his thoughts began to blur, right when that soft drop should happen. Tick, not a sound. Not pain, just a tiny shove from somewhere inside him. A clean, cold pulse that snapped his mind back into sharpness, as if someone had clapped beside his ear. Awake, every time. At first, he thought it was fear. Everyone said he was a demon. Everyone looked at him like he might explode. It made sense that sleep would be dangerous, like letting your guard down in front of a wild animal. So when it started, Naruto fought it the way he fought everything, by pretending it wasn't happening. The first week, he told himself it was just a bad stretch, like a fever. He'd crawl under his thin blanket, squeeze his eyes shut, and demand that his body obey. He would count cracks in the ceiling until the numbers turned strange. He would imagine ramen so hard, he could almost taste it. He would mutter, sleep, 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 like it was a jutsu. And then, right when his breathing slowed and his thoughts slid toward the edge, tick, his eyes would open, wide and clear, as if he'd never been tired at all. The second week, he got angry. He kicked his wall and bruised his toes. He punched his pillow until his knuckles hurt. He yelled into the dark, "Stop it! Let me sleep!" and waited for an answer that never came. No voice, no laughter, no claws scraping at the inside of his ribs. Just that same presence, distant and watchful, like a shadow behind a closed door. After a month, it stopped being scary and started being a fact, like the color of his hair. Like the way shopkeepers' smiles died when he walked in. For years later, Naruto had learned something even stranger. He wasn't tired. That should have been impossible. He'd heard adults talk about how you needed sleep, or you'd get stupid, sick, slow. He'd seen kids at the academy yawn until their eyes watered. He'd watched Irika-sensei rub his face like it was heavy. Naruto should have been a wobbling mess, stumbling through class and forgetting his own name. But he wasn't. His body felt perfect. Like someone was fixing things when he wasn't looking. When he ran, his legs burned like anyone's, and when he got sick, he still coughed and shivered. But his mind stayed sharp, and his emotions didn't pile up into a fog the way he'd expected. Even on the longest nights, his thoughts stayed clean, like they'd been rinsed out. That was the worst part. He couldn't even blame his loneliness on being too tired to handle it. He felt every quiet second clearly. Naruto continued walking, past dark windows, past a closed flower shop, past a little house where a warm orange light glowed through a crack in the curtains. Inside, someone laughed, softly, the kind of laugh that belonged to family. Naruto slowed without meaning to. He didn't look directly. He already knew what he would see if he did. A table, steaming food, hands passing bowls, a parent ruffling their child's hair before bed. A bed. He swallowed, throat tight, and forced his feet to move again. There was a moment, always, when he got angry at whatever it was keeping him awake. It felt almost like a foreign chakra, something not his. That is why he got angry, not because it kept him awake. but because it was company, a presence, a weight, something that never left him. The road curved toward the edge of the village where the academy grounds sat quiet and empty. The fence posts were dusted white, and the training yard beyond was a blank sheet of snow with the outlines of target posts like dead trees. Naruto stopped at the fence, gripping the wood. It was cold enough to sting his palms through his gloves. He stared at the yard the way someone might stare at a locked pantry. A memory surfaced, sharp, as if it had been waiting. 2 days ago, during lunch, Naruto had been shoved out of a shop again. He'd landed on his hands and knees in the slush, and when he looked up, he'd seen a group of academy kids across the street. They'd been practicing throwing stones at a knot in a tree, laughing when one hit close. One of them had made a sloppy hand sign and bragged about learning a real jutsu soon. Now, with the training yard empty and the whole village asleep, he realized something that made his heart thump in his chest. Everyone else had to waste a third of their life unconscious. He didn't. He could hate it. He could pace the streets and count lanterns until dawn. He could press his forehead to cold glass and pretend he didn't want what was inside. Or he could take this as a blessing and train. Train like he never had before. Maybe then he wouldn't be at the bottom of the academy. Naruto's hands tightened on the fence until the wood creaked. The idea hit him so cleanly, it almost didn't feel like his own thought. Not a plan with lots of pieces. Just a straight line. If he couldn't sleep, then he could train. And if he trained when everyone else slept, nobody would see him mess up. Nobody would laugh. Nobody would tell him he didn't deserve to stand on this ground. His mind flicked through the excuses he'd used for years. The excuses felt small compared to the wide, empty hours stretched out in front of him every night like a road. He hopped the fence, landing in the snow with a crash. The cold bit through his entire body immediately. Naruto grinned anyway, teeth bright in the dark. "All right," he whispered, more to himself than anyone. His stomach fluttered, nervous and excited at the same time. "So what do we do in the academy again?" Thinking of the academy's lessons, Naruto began piecing together something dangerously close to a plan. Not the kind Iruka-sensei liked. Neat, written on paper, but something rough and alive. There were about 10 hours before the academy doors opened again. He couldn't use all of them. Someone might see him. 8 hours, then. 8 hours stolen from the night. He mapped it out in his head like a mission. 2 hours running, laps around the yard, around the village edge, until his lungs burned and his legs stopped feeling like they belonged to him. 2 hours on strength and flexibility. Push-ups until his arms shook, sit-ups until his stomach cramped, squats until his knees screamed, stretching until the cold felt like it was tearing him apart. 2 hours with weapons, kunai and shuriken, throwing again and again until his hands learned what his eyes never seemed to. And the last 2 hours? Fighting. Punches, kicks, footwork, dodges. Shadowboxing an enemy that never tired and never went easy on him. It wasn't perfect. It didn't have to be. It just had to be more than what he'd been doing before. Naruto inhaled deeply, the air freezing his lungs, and took off running. The first lap was easy. The second still felt fine. By the fifth, the cold had crawled into his bones, and by the 10th his breath came out in harsh, ragged clouds. Snow crunched beneath his sandals, slipping just enough to keep him alert. His legs protested early, muscles unused to this kind of punishment, but Naruto ground his teeth and kept moving. "This is mine," he thought, pounding past the empty swings, past shuttered windows. "No one can take this from me." When he finally stopped, his chest heaving, sweat steaming off his skin despite the cold, he bent over with his hands on his knees and laughed, a breathless, half-crazed sound. It hurt. Everything hurt. And somehow, that made him feel better than he had in a long time. Strength training came next. His arms buckled on the first set of push-ups, dumping him face first into the snow. He sputtered, spat, and glared at the ground like it had personally insulted him. His form was terrible, and he knew it. His count was inconsistent. By the end, his arms were trembling so badly he could barely hold himself upright. Stretching felt worse, muscles stiff and screaming as he forced them to lengthen. But he remembered Iruka once saying injuries were for idiots who rush things. Weapon practice was humbling. Kunai thunked into wood at awkward angles. Shuriken clipped the edges of targets or missed entirely, skittering off into the snow. Naruto chased them down, retrieved them, and threw again. And again. And again. His fingers went numb. His shoulders ached. Slowly, so slowly he almost didn't notice. One shuriken struck closer to the center than the rest. Naruto stared at it, eyes wide. The final hours were spent throwing punches at the darkness, feet sliding, breath heavy. He practiced dodging attacks that weren't there, blocking blows that only existed in his imagination. He fell more than once. Got back up every time. By the time the sky began to lighten, pale gray bleeding into black, Naruto collapsed onto the cold ground, staring upward. His entire body felt like it had been run over by a cart. He was exhausted in a way he'd never felt before. And yet, his mind was clear. As the sun rose over the Hokage stone faces, Naruto dragged himself home. Every step complained. Ankles stiff, shoulders tight. The bruised bloom along his ribs pulsed with each breath like it had its own heartbeat. He kept moving anyway, because stopping meant thinking about how much everything hurt. And thinking had a way of turning into doubt. The street was mostly empty this early. A shopkeeper sweeping his stoop paused just long enough to glare. A woman tugged her kid closer when she saw him coming. The usual. He made it to his building, climbed the stairs like they were a mountain, and fumbled his key into the lock. The door stuck. It always stuck. He shoved his shoulder into it and stumbled inside, kicking it shut behind him with a heel. Naruto didn't even bother with the light. He went straight to the bathroom, peeled off his jacket, and turned the shower on. Water hammered down, loud in the tiny apartment. At first it was cold enough to bite, and he hissed through his teeth. Then it warmed, steam rising to fog the cracked mirror, and the ache in his muscles started to loosen its grip, slowly, stubbornly, like it didn't want to let him go. He braced his hands against the wall and let his forehead rest there. This is what getting stronger feels like, he thought. Not some big heroic moment. Just soreness. Just staying up when you want to fall. When he finally stepped out, his skin was pink and his hair stuck out worse than ever, wet spikes refusing to behave. He toweled off, pulled on clean clothes, and stared at himself for a second in the mirror. Nothing had changed really. But in time maybe it would. In the kitchen, he tore open a cup of instant ramen like it was a sacred ritual. The smell hit and his stomach answered immediately. He bounced on his heels while it cooked, impatient as always, then slurped it down so fast the broth nearly burned his tongue. Worth it. He leaned back in his chair, empty cup in hand, and let out a long breath, the kind that left more than air behind. A new day. Naruto jammed his feet into his sandals and stepped outside. The village was waking up now, shutters opening, merchants hauling crates, shinobi moving with that easy, purposeful stride like the world belonged to them. Naruto walked among it all like he always did, loud in his own head even when he wasn't making a sound. A man spotted him and muttered something under his breath. A teenage girl's expression pinched like she'd tasted something sour. A couple of people looked away too fast when he caught their eyes. He felt it, but at least they were looking. As long as one person looked, he wouldn't disappear. Still, class was class, and it didn't bring much entertainment. He could already picture it. Irika-sensei's stern face. The other kids' whispers. The way they watched him like he was a fire they couldn't decide whether to fear or poke. Naruto's mouth twitched. If they were going to stare anyway, he might as well give them something to stare at. By the time he reached the academy, the courtyard was full of kids trickling in, some yawning, some laughing, some already comparing kunai they weren't supposed to bring. Naruto slipped through them like a gust of wind, quick and bright, and made for the open classroom door. Irika wasn't inside yet. Perfect. Naruto's eyes scanned the room, landing on the teacher's desk, on the chalk, on the eraser, on the neat stack of papers that always made Naruto feel like the world was made of rules he wasn't allowed to touch. He grinned anyway, with the speed of someone who'd been caught 1,000 times and learned exactly how fast he could be. He swapped the eraser on the ledge for the other eraser, the one he'd prepared earlier. It looked normal, same shape, same worn edges, but Naruto had pressed a thin layer of chalk dust into it until it was basically a powdered bomb waiting for a victim. Harmless. Mostly. He hopped back, satisfied, and dropped into a seat near the middle of the room. Not the back, too suspicious. Not the front, too much effort. The middle meant he could see everything and still pretend he wasn't trying. Kids filled in around him. Shikamaru slouched 2 rows over like gravity had a personal grudge. Kiba barreled in, loud as ever, followed by Akamaru's little puppy yip from inside his jacket. Sakura and Ino arrived together and immediately didn't arrive together, splitting like magnets turned the wrong way. Sasuke walked in last, like he owned the air. The room settled into its usual rhythm, chairs scraping, chatter rising, someone laughing too high. Naruto drummed his fingers on the desk, feeling that leftover burn in his arms from last night. He rolled his shoulders once, subtle. Testing. Still sore. Still here. The door slid open and Irika stepped in, arms full of materials, hair tied back, eyes already tired in that way adults always looked. His gaze swept the room once, sharp enough to pin down trouble before it moved. It paused on Naruto for half a heartbeat. Naruto gave him his most innocent smile. Iruka narrowed his eyes like he didn't buy it for a second, then sighed and set his things down. All right, take your seats. Quiet down. Groans and shuffles followed, but they listened. Mostly, Iruka turned to the board, picked up the chalk, wrote the day's topic in clean strokes. Naruto's grin tried to escape again. He bit it back. Iruka stepped aside and reached for the eraser. For one glorious, suspended moment, Naruto imagined it. The cloud of white dust, Iruka's shocked face, the class exploding into laughter. Iruka stopped. His hand hovered. He stared at the eraser like it had personally offended him. Naruto's stomach dipped. Slowly, Iruka turned his head. His eyes locked onto Naruto with the calm of someone who had seen every prank in existence and was already deciding what punishment fit best. Naruto froze, caught mid-breath. Iruka's mouth twitched. Not a smile. Not quite. More like a warning that had learned how to smirk. "Uzumaki," he said, voice flat. After class, the room went in unison. Sakura shot him an irritated look. Kiba snorted. Shikamaru didn't even lift his head. Naruto lifted his hands like he was surrendering. "What? I didn't do anything." Iruka didn't even look convinced. He just picked up the normal eraser from his desk drawer, because of course he had won, and erased the board with it like Naruto's plan had been a mild inconvenience at best. Then he faced the class. "Now," Iruka said, tapping the chalk against his palm. "Today we're reviewing chakra control. And if anyone feels the need to test their creativity, they can do it by actually learning something." Naruto slumped back into his chair with a groan. He planted his elbows on the desk, eyes forward, and told himself, quietly, firmly, "I'm still going to get stronger, even if I have to sit through a whole day of this first." Just like that, 2 years slipped by. Naruto blinked one day and realized he wasn't the loud little kid anymore. He was still loud, obviously, but the mirror didn't lie. His shoulders had broadened. His arms had corded with lean muscle. Even the way he stood had changed, lighter on his feet, balanced without thinking, like his body remembered 1,000 late nights his mind tried to forget. Training had paid off. So why? Why was he still getting beaten by Sasuke? The spar ended with a scrape of sandals and a sharp twist of Naruto's wrist that he didn't even understand until he was already on his back. The ceiling stared down at him, blurry for a second. His lungs refused to catch up. A kunai hovered inches from his throat, held perfectly steady. Sasuke's eyes were calm, cold, bored, like this outcome was inevitable. Naruto swallowed, throat tight against steel. His hand twitched toward his own weapon. Too slow. "All right, that's enough," Iruka called, voice cutting clean through the air. The kunai lifted away. Naruto lay there anyway, stunned more by the familiar helplessness than the fall. Girls cheered. Of course they did. Ino clapped. A few others giggled. Sakura's voice rang out brightest, calling Sasuke's name like it was a prize she'd already decided belonged to him. Naruto's lips pressed into a thin line. The old sting tried to flare, hot and childish and desperate, but it didn't catch the way it used to. Not fully. A sigh slipped out. "She's not going to like me." And for the first time in a long time, the thought didn't feel like the end of the world. His feelings for Sakura hadn't vanished. Not completely, but they'd faded, worn down night after night by the steady rhythm of training that didn't care who cheered for who. This was for him now. He stood when Iruka dismissed them, brushing dust off his clothes like he wasn't shaking inside. Sasuke had beaten him without even looking like he'd tried. Again. And Naruto hated it. Hated the gap. Hated the way the room treated it like it was natural law. But hate was fuel. After class, Iruka called him over with a tilt of his head. "Uzumaki." A word. Naruto tried to look like he hadn't been sulking. It probably failed. Iruka waited until the classroom emptied, then leaned back against his desk, arms folded. "I can see how much stronger you've gotten," he said. Not soft. Not pitying. Just matter of fact. Physically, you're ahead of the whole class. Even Sasuke and Choji. Naruto's chest warmed at that, then cooled immediately when Iruka's gaze sharpened. "But you're fighting like you're wearing a blindfold." Naruto frowned. "What? You lack almost everything else." Iruka cut in, and it stung because it was true. "You want to be a ninja? You still need to pass the written test. Those don't get easier. They get worse the higher you climb." Naruto opened his mouth, then closed it. The word Hokage hovered behind his teeth like a stubborn ghost. Iruka stepped forward, tapping 2 fingers against Naruto's forehead protector, not unkindly. "You want to be Hokage, right?" then you need knowledge. We don't teach this stuff because it's fun. It's tactics, it's fighting forms, when to throw a kunai and when to not. When to use a jutsu to make the fight yours instead of trading blows until you lose. Irika's eyes didn't waver. I'll put it simply, Naruto. If you put half the effort into class that you put into pranks, you'd be near the top of the class in no time. Naruto's jaw tightened. His first instinct was to argue, because arguing was what he did. But the words wouldn't come, because he could still feel that kunai near his throat. Irika's expression eased just a fraction, like he'd been waiting for Naruto to actually listen. Come on, he said, grabbing his vest. I'm buying. You look like you got hit by a cart. Naruto blinked. Ramen. Irika sighed like it was a burden, but Naruto knew the truth. Ichiraku. That snapped the emptiness out of Naruto's chest like a rubber band. Yes, they ate until Naruto's stomach was heavy and warm, and the world didn't seem so sharp around the edges. Tsuchi smiled like Naruto was just another kid. Im refilled his bowl without flinching. Irika talked about nothing and everything, letting Naruto pretend for an hour that he wasn't a problem the village wanted to ignore. Then the sun dipped. The village thinned out. Lights went out one by one. Voices faded into closed doors. Naruto walked home with his hands in his pockets, belly full, mind quieter than usual. And when he finally lay down, staring at the ceiling, it came again. That familiar foreign chakra. It washed through him like a second heartbeat, steady, patient, clearing and nourishing his mind, but refusing him sleep the way it always did. Night after night, like his own body was insisting he stay awake. Naruto exhaled slow. Fine, he muttered to the darkness. I don't know why I even try anymore. And just like every night, he went back out, back to the academy. The building was dark, quiet, the kind of quiet that made every footstep feel illegal. Naruto slipped through a window he'd learned to pry open without making a sound. The classroom smelled like chalk and old wood. Moonlight cut across the desks in pale stripes. Naruto stared at Irika's desk for a long moment, remembering the words. If you put half the effort into class, was he right? Naruto scratched the back of his head, scowling. TCH. Yeah, probably. So he changed his routine. No excuses. No shortcuts. No, I'll do it tomorrow. Tonight became the first night Naruto trained like he actually meant it. He started with a solid hour of physical training. Real physical training, not just do push-ups until bored. He set rules, counted reps, timed sprints, forced himself to hold stances until his legs trembled. He ran stairs until his breath burned and his vision spotted, then ran them again anyway. When the hour hit, he didn't stop because he felt good. He stopped because he'd promised himself he would. Then endurance, long-distance laps around the empty academy grounds, alternating bursts of speed with controlled breathing. He learned to pace, to keep something in reserve. He hated pacing. It felt like losing on purpose, but he did it. Kunai and shuriken next. He dragged a practice board out from the storage room and set it at different distances. Close, far, angled. He threw until the skin between his fingers went raw. He forced himself to retrieve each weapon the same way, to plant his feet the same way, to breathe the same way. At first, everything scattered. Then, after dozens, after hundreds, his hits began to cluster. Not perfect. Not like Sasuke, but tighter, and that mattered. Technique training came after. Punches, kicks, dodges. He moved through forms he half remembered from class and half invented on his own, correcting his balance when he felt himself overcommit. He practiced slipping to the side instead of backing up. He practiced staying low. He practiced taking a hit on his forearm instead of his ribs. He shadow fought an enemy that didn't exist, sweating hard enough to make his hair drip, and every time his body screamed, he reminded it of the kunai at his throat. Then came the part he dreaded, the part that didn't make his arms stronger, the part that didn't make him feel cool. Studying. Naruto broke into the storage room for textbooks and scrolls like he was committing a crime against nature. He stacked them on a desk, lit a small candle, and sat down like the chair had teeth. For hours, he told himself, just 4. At first, it was torture. Words swam. Diagrams blurred. Every page felt like it was mocking him. He tried to read about chakra pathways and wanted to slam his forehead into the desk until the information stayed there permanently. After 2 hours, Naruto's eye twitched. His head throbbed. His stomach, full of ramen, felt like it regretted every life choice. He shoved a book aside, glaring at it like it had personally insulted him. Who even writes like this? He hissed to the empty room. His gaze snagged on a scroll he hadn't opened yet. The title was written in bold ink. Deception is a ninja's best friend. Naruto groaned. Great, more old people being creepy. He cracked it open anyway. The first lines hit differently than the others, Less like memorizing and more like someone whispering a secret. Hiding your strength is key. Once you reveal your full hand, your enemy learns you. If you keep something back, you control the moment you end the fight. Naruto blinked. He read it again. It was simple, sharp, like a kunai. And suddenly, something clicked in his head in a way diagrams never had. He always fought like he had to prove something. Like he had to show everything. All at once. Loud. Obvious. Desperate to be seen. Sasuke didn't. Sasuke let Naruto swing and swing and swing until Naruto got tired, and then ended it. Naruto's fingers curled on the scroll. He murmured, surprised by the interest sparking in his chest. That's actually useful. He kept reading. The scroll talked about feints, about baiting reactions, about giving your opponent the wrong idea on purpose, about how a ninja wasn't a hero in a story. They were someone who survived by making the other guy make a mistake. Naruto sat a little straighter. Maybe the others weren't just repeating boring stuff for nothing. Maybe he just hadn't understood what he was looking at. His eyes slid to the stack of books again, still intimidating, still ugly, still filled with words he hated. But now they looked less like punishment and more like weapons he hadn't learned to use yet. Naruto exhaled, picked up the next text, and forced his eyes to the page. All right, he muttered, voice quiet in the empty classroom. Fine, I'll get smarter. Outside, the village slept. Inside, Naruto trained, body aching, mind sharp, candle burning low, learning, slowly, stubbornly, that strength wasn't just fists. As class began the next day, Naruto didn't pull a prank. That alone made the room feel wrong. Iruka walked in with his usual stack of papers and his usual tired eyes, then paused like he'd stepped into a trap. His gaze swept the chalk ledge, the erasers, the doorframe, the ceiling corners. He even glanced at the window Naruto liked to sneak through. Nothing. Naruto sat there with his chin propped on his hand, looking bored enough to be believable. Iruka narrowed his eyes anyway. As the lesson started, something else felt wrong. Naruto was paying attention, not staring in the general direction of the board while thinking about ramen. Real attention. His eyes tracked the chalk. His posture shifted when Iruka drew a diagram. He actually raised his hand once, then coughed and turned it into an obnoxious stretch like it hadn't happened. Iruka blinked at him like he'd seen a ghost. A small smile tugged at his mouth before he could stop it, and that smile made him stumble over his own words. Naruto's head snapped up immediately. Oichhh, he crowed, pointing like he'd just discovered a new species. Iruka-sensei's getting soft. He's smiling. Someone write it down. A few kids snickered. Iruka's ears went pink. Uzumaki. Naruto didn't miss a beat. Don't worry, sensei. I won't tell anyone you have feelings. Iruka's shout echoed down the hallway. Some students laughed. Most clicked their tongues and rolled their eyes like Naruto was a fly that refused to die. Naruto grinned like he didn't care. And he didn't. At least, not the way he used to. Because he wasn't changing overnight. He wasn't becoming quiet. He wasn't becoming Sasuke. He was just adjusting his aim. He listened. He scribbled notes. He hid them under his elbow or inside his sleeve. When the opportunity presented itself, he still took it, still jabbed Iruka with a joke, still poked the class with a little chaos. But the difference was this. He did it on purpose now, not because he needed attention to breathe, because it was a tool. And just like that, his new routine settled in like a second life, all the way until graduation. In class, he stayed tuned in, even when he pretended he wasn't. He leaned back in his chair and yawned dramatically while his eyes memorized hand seals from the board. He complained loudly about boring stuff, while quietly noting down the exact weaknesses Iruka explained. How a stance telegraphed a strike, how a shinobi's shoulders shifted before a throw, how the wrong kunai grip cost you speed. He got better at the written tests. Not perfect, on purpose. His score climbed just enough to stop being embarrassing, but never high enough to draw real attention. Sometimes he'd finish early, stare at his paper, and then deliberately leave a few answers blank like he'd gotten distracted. He could feel the eyes on him. The whispers. Naruto let them think what they wanted. In spars, he changed too. He still charged sometimes, because he was Naruto, and sometimes his blood demanded it. But other times he fought like he was studying someone's soul. He'd let himself get pushed back just to see how they advanced. He'd mess up, a block to learn whether his opponent followed with a sweep or a straight punch. He took mental notes. Right foot forward, favors the shoulder, drops the guard when attacking, flinches at feints. Sometimes he even let himself lose. It burned. Every time. But it gave him something sharper than pride. Information. He'd never beaten Sasuke, but then again he never tried to. Sasuke was probably hiding something, but not nearly as much as he was. Maybe some fancy jutsu. Or perhaps those eyes the Uchiha were famous for. Still, Naruto hadn't just kept getting stronger. He'd kept pulling away. What used to be a simple set of bodyweight drills had turned into something else entirely. Sandbags crashing into the ground, a weight vest biting into his shoulders, the air going thin in his lungs. The same movements, sure, but heavier, harsher, unforgiving. Each rep felt less like training and more like a controlled kind of torture. And with every session, the distance between them didn't shrink. It grew. At night, Naruto kept training. The academy after dark became his second home. The creak of old floorboards, the smell of chalk, the quiet that made every sound feel louder. He'd break in through the same window, light a small candle, and move through his schedule with the stubborn consistency of someone trying to outrun his own fate. Physical work first, shorter now, tighter, more efficient. Strength circuits until his muscles trembled. Sprint intervals until his lungs burned. Stance holds until his legs shook. Shadow boxing until sweat ran down his back and his arms felt like lead. Then weapons. Kunai throws from kneeling, standing, turning. Shuriken flicks with minimal motion. He practiced drawing without looking, grabbing by feel, throwing while moving. He set up crude targets, chalk circles, broken boards, scratch marks on wood, and forced himself to hit the same spot until it stopped being luck. Then came technique, forms, footwork, dodging drills. He marked lines on the floor with chalk and made himself stay inside them. No wasted steps. No overreaching. No spinning unless he could recover instantly. He practiced slipping to the outside of strikes, redirecting momentum instead of meeting it head-on, breathing through impact. And then, chakra control, the part that humbled him. Naruto had raided what he could from the library without getting chased out. Most of it was basic, Genin-level exercises, stuff the academy mentioned but never drilled. But Naruto treated it like treasure. He started with the simplest, the leaf exercise, a leaf on his forehead, a steady trickle of chakra to keep it pinned there without falling. Too much chakra, and it shot off like it had been slapped. Too little, and it drifted down onto his nose. He did it until his eyes crossed. Then the coin. A small coin balanced on the bridge of his nose, chakra holding it steady while he walked, crouched, jumped, spun. He dropped it 100 times. Picked it up 101. Then the cup of water. He'd sit on the academy roof and push chakra through his fingers into the cup, trying to make the surface ripple in controlled patterns. 1 ring, 2 rings, stop. Or rotate the water slowly without spilling. It sounded stupid until he realized how precise it forced him to be. He learned tree walking from a borrowed text and bruised his shins for a week doing it wrong. At first, he blasted chakra into his feet like he was trying to nail himself to the trunk. He'd stick too hard and tear bark, or slip because his chakra surged unevenly. He fell so many times he started laughing at himself just to keep from screaming. Then, finally, it clicked. Not power, control, a steady, even flow. The first time he made it halfway up without slipping, he froze there like the tree had turned into sacred ground. The second time he went higher. The third time he ran up it until his calves burned and the wind hit his face and he felt, just for a moment, like he belonged in the sky with everyone else. He tried wall sticking too, palms flat against a vertical surface, chakra flowing evenly through his hands. He practiced moving sideways without losing adhesion, like a spider. It helped his fine control, even if he looked ridiculous doing it. He even worked on his breath, slow in, slow out, matching chakra flow to the rhythm so it didn't surge whenever he got frustrated. It all helped. Everything strengthened his base. Everything sharpened him. And still, the clone jutsu refused to obey. No matter how many times Iruka explained it, no matter how many diagrams Naruto copied, no matter how many nights he sat in an empty classroom and forced his chakra into the shape it was supposed to take. He could make clones now, but they weren't right. Sometimes they came out pale and trembling, like sick reflections. Sometimes they were too solid in one spot and too thin in another. An arm wrong, a face blurred, eyes unfocused. Sometimes he got the number he wanted, but they looked like they were about to collapse from a stiff breeze. The worst part, they were improving. Clearer, more polished, more real, just not enough. Not 3 perfect clones, not consistently. Graduation was days away. Naruto stared at his hands one night, breath uneven, candle guttering low, and felt something ugly twist in his stomach. All this effort, all this pain, and he was still going to fail? No, he refused. The thought came up like a snarl. He'd worked too hard to be the joke at the end. Too hard to be the kid everyone expected to fall short. So he doubled down. He stopped wasting time on anything that didn't push him forward. Academy, training, learning, home, training, learning, Back to the academy at night. Training. He made a promise to himself in the middle of one exhausted night, sweat drying cold on his skin. If he passed, he'd retire the orange jumper, not because he hated it. It was him. It always had been, but because he wanted proof that he could change on purpose, like a parent handing down a ritual. Except there was no parent, just Naruto, maybe black, maybe gray, something more ninja-like. Something that didn't scream for attention even when he walked into a room. He didn't decide yet. He just held the promise like a rope. 3 days left. Naruto cut his physical training in half, not because he wanted to, but because he needed the extra time. More chakra work, more precision, more reps, more attempts until his hands shook from forcing control instead of power. Leaf, coin, water, tree, wall, breath, clone, clone, clone. Again, his frustration rose like fire. He smothered it, forced his chakra to stay steady even when his teeth clenched, even when his eyes stung, even when the foreign chakra inside him kept him awake like it wanted to see how far he'd go. The day of reckoning approached fast, too fast, and then it was here. Naruto walked into the academy on the morning of the exam with his heart beating hard enough to rattle his ribs. The hallway felt louder than usual, even with everyone trying to act casual. He could smell chalk dust, old wood, nervous sweat. His palms were also damp. Naruto wondered if he'd be able to pass. He'd already done the written exam, and for once, there was no doubt. What used to be a weakness had become easy. He'd moved through the questions like a blade through paper, answers falling into place without effort. The only person who'd probably matched him was Sakura. She'd always been frighteningly good at theory, but theory didn't matter when you were standing at the edge of a cliff. The practical was next, and his clones still weren't right. He flexed his fingers, palms damp. The foreign chakra inside him pulsed like a second heartbeat, steady, clearing his mind, refusing him the one mercy everyone else got before. Something terrifying, sleep. He'd found a new chakra control method in the library just yesterday, something beyond leaves and coins and cups. Walking on water. If he could do that, his control would sharpen. It had to, but he hadn't tested it yet, not once, and the thought of repeating the year made his stomach twist until he almost gagged. Another year of whispers. Another year of being that kid. Another year of watching Sasuke glide forward while Naruto clawed at the same wall. He shuddered. Naruto Uzumaki. His name cracked through the hall like a thrown kunai. Naruto's hands tried to tremble again. He forced them still, one breath in, one breath out, and started walking toward the pavilion where the exam was being held. The corridor narrowed as he approached, like the building wanted to press him into the floor. Near the entrance, 3 classmates lingered. Choji, Shikamaru, and Ino. They noticed him the moment he got close. Ino's smile sharpened. Try not to fail, Naruto. Her eyes flicked over him like he was something stuck to her shoe. Although I can't imagine you'll be passing. Shikamaru gave him a lazy half nod, then yawned so hard his eyes watered. Of course. The guy probably slept 12 hours a day and still looked offended by daylight. Naruto felt a flash of envy so bitter it almost made him laugh. Choji simply held out a chip bag without looking awkward about it. No pity. No fear. Naruto took a chip like it was a gift from another world. Thanks, Choji. Nothing else was said. The silence between them wasn't friendly, exactly, but it wasn't cruel either. Naruto took that and walked on. The doors to the pavilion loomed. He stared at them for a heartbeat too long, then inhaled and pushed them open. Inside, 3 instructors waited. Iruka-sensei stood in the center, arms folded, face careful in that way adults got when they didn't want their emotions to show. Mizuki hovered to the side, smiling like he was everyone's favorite teacher. And beside them was a third man Naruto didn't recognize. Older, broader, with the kind of tired eyes that looked like they'd seen 100 kids cry and had learned not to flinch. Head teacher, Naruto realized. The final say. One by one, they put him through the basics. Transformation. Substitution. Simple illusion. Simple escape. The kind of jutsu Naruto used to mess up just to make someone yell at him. Now, he did them clean. Fast. Controlled. Each seal sharp. Each burst of chakra measured like he'd counted it. Iruka's eyebrows rose once, just barely. Mizuki's smile didn't change. Then Iruka's voice landed like a guillotine. Clone jutsu. Naruto's throat went dry. He stepped into the center of the room. The floorboards were polished smooth. His sandals squeaked if he shifted wrong. The air felt too warm, too quiet, like the whole village was holding its breath. Naruto formed the hand signs. He closed his eyes. He prayed. Not to the Hokage, not to the village, not to anyone who'd ever called him demon, just to his own chakra. Be steady. He released the jutsu. When he opened his eyes, 3 Narutos stood in front of him. For a heartbeat, His heart leapt. They weren't pale. They weren't shaking. Their faces were clearer than they'd ever been. The bodies looked almost perfect, almost real. Then his gaze dropped. Feet. Wrong. Not fully formed. Edges blurred like wet ink. Head. Just a little too soft around the hairline, like someone had smudged the outline. Tiny flaws. The kind of flaws that didn't matter in a prank. The kind of flaws that mattered here. Naruto's face hardened, like he could force the jutsu into perfection just by glaring at it. He looked at Iruka, and in Iruka's eyes, he saw the answer before anyone spoke. Iruka hesitated, then turned slightly to the head teacher. He passed everything else with flying colors. Clones have never been his strong suit. The head teacher sighed, cutting Iruka off, already tired. The clone jutsu is a requirement, he said, voice flat and practiced. It's the hardest academy technique for chakra control. We can't make exceptions. Something inside Naruto went cold. Not the room, not the air. Him. He didn't argue. He didn't yell. He didn't even breathe. He just turned and ran. The hallway blurred. His feet slapped the floor hard enough to hurt. The sound chased him like footsteps. Tears tried to rise. Hot. Humiliating. But he swallowed them down until his throat burned. Why? Why was this one thing the wall he couldn't break? Why could he train until his body screamed and study until candles died and still be stopped by a stupid, basic jutsu? His mind spun so wildly, he almost believed anything. If someone had told him right then that he was going to be exiled, that the Hokage had finally decided he was too dangerous, Naruto would have nodded like it made perfect sense. He hit open air, climbed to the rooftops, and ran until the wind ripped at his hair and the cold stung his cheeks like punishment. Home. He dropped into his apartment, slammed the door, and collapsed onto the floor of his room like gravity had finally won. Pitiful. That was the word that kept circling his head. Pitiful. 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 After everything, this was all he amounted to? Time passed in ugly chunks. Minutes that felt like hours. Hours that felt like the same thought chewing on him from the inside. Then, a knock. Naruto froze, staring at the door like it might bite him. He didn't want to answer, but something in him, something stubborn and alive, dragged him up anyway. He opened the door. Mizuki stood there, smiling. Naruto blinked, surprised enough that his grief stumbled for a second. Mizuki-sensei? Mizuki's voice dropped into something gentle, conspiratorial. Naruto, we spoke after you ran out. He leaned in like they were sharing a secret. If you steal the scroll of seals from the Hokage's office and learn one jutsu from it, he paused, letting the bait hang in the air, we'll allow you to pass. Naruto's eyes widened. A light snapped on inside his chest, so sudden it almost hurt. It didn't matter that it sounded insane. It didn't matter that a smarter Naruto, a calm Naruto, should have heard the wrongness in every word. All he could hear was, pass, graduate, headband, a team, a real step toward Hokage. He swallowed hard. You mean it? Mizuki nodded, smile warm, hands open like he was offering Naruto a lifeline. Of course. But you have to be quick. The Hokage keeps it under guard. Naruto's mind raced, fast and messy, but focused. All I gotta do is avoid the old man. He almost snorted. Old man third avoids me like I'm contagious. This'll be easy. Mizuki chuckled like Naruto was adorable. Naruto didn't see the way Mizuki's eyes sharpened. Didn't see the satisfaction hiding behind that smile. Good, Mizuki said. I'll be waiting. He left. Naruto shut the door, heart hammering. He didn't notice how the foreign chakra inside him pulsed once, steady, patient, as if it had just leaned closer to watch. Naruto grabbed his jacket. No hesitation, no doubt. He started planning. The Hokage's office was easy enough to get into. It was everything that came after that. Naruto was familiar there. Too familiar. Every month he marched in to collect his allowance. And for years, back when noise was the only way to prove he existed, he'd made a sport out of pranking the old man. That familiarity was a weapon now. He crouched on the edge of a rooftop and stared at the Hokage monument, the stone faces watching the village like they owned the sky. The sun was bleeding out behind them, turning the clouds orange-red. Stage it like a prank, Naruto thought. If he caused a loud enough scene up there, every guard with a pulse would go running. The Hokage would notice. The AMBU would move. The village would look up. Then Naruto could slip behind the attention, circle back, hit the office while everyone was chasing the obvious threat. He built the plan in his head like a mission. Paint. Monument. Maximum noise. Maximum insult. Then run. Loop back. Transformation. Scroll. And after that, he'd figure it out. Naruto didn't waste time talking himself out of it. He left immediately. He cut through the village as evening settled in, weaving between streets with the quiet efficiency he'd earned in 1,000 nights. The monument grew larger with every block, the faces more massive, more arrogant. A paint shop sat near the main road, lamps glowing warmly inside like it didn't know what kind of chaos Naruto was about to buy. He slapped money onto the counter without counting it. The shopkeeper hesitated, eyes narrowing, recognition flickering, and then the man's expression soured. Naruto was already grabbing a bucket and a brush. Thanks, he chirped, loud enough to be annoying on purpose, and bolted before the argument could start. Cold air hit his lungs as he sprinted. The stone faces loomed. The cliffside rose. Naruto planted his foot against the rock and poured chakra into his soles, tree walking, but sideways. The wall caught him like a hand. He ran up it fast, paint sloshing dangerously in the bucket. Then he reached the first face and went to work. He didn't paint carefully. He painted mean, great fat streaks of color, ugly lines, massive, disrespectful shapes that screamed Naruto was here across the Hokage's forehead. He banged the bucket against stone, splashed paint like it was war, and laughed loud enough for half the village to hear. Ichiwai, someone shouted down below. What the? Naruto grinned and painted faster. It took less than a minute before the response hit. A sharp voice barked orders from the tower. Shadows moved on rooftops. ANBU masks flashed in the dusk. Shinobi started converging toward the cliff like steel drawn to a magnet. Perfect. Stop him. Naruto waited until he could feel the focus snap onto him, until he became the center of the village's attention like he used to be in the worst way. Then he snapped his hands together. Substitution, a burst of smoke, and the Naruto on the monument became a painted bucket balanced stupidly on a ledge. The real Naruto dropped backward off the cliff like a stone, twisting midair. Chakra flared at his feet, and he hit the wall run again. Racing down the rock face at an angle like gravity was just another rule he didn't care about. He landed hard, rolled, and sprinted. Phase 2. He reached the Hokage Tower fast. Too fast for most people to register that the real Naruto had already left the monument behind. His lungs burned. His heart hammered in his chest. But his mind stayed razor clear, rinsed clean by that foreign chakra that never let him fade into exhaustion. He slipped inside. Hallways. Stairs. Familiar turns. He knew this place, knew where the guards tended to stand, where the squeaky floorboards were, where the office door sat like the center of the web. He moved quieter now, breath controlled, straight to the Hokage's room. He didn't knock. He burst in. Hiruzen Sarutobi looked up from his desk like he'd been waiting to scold a storm. His eyes widened, veins in his forehead rising as he saw the paint bucket strap across Naruto's shoulder. Naruto, the third Hokage roared, voice echoing off the walls. What are you doing here? You need to clean up this mess now. Naruto didn't answer. He didn't argue. He didn't even smirk. He just formed a seal. Transformation. Smoke exploded outward, and where Naruto had stood was a half-clothed woman striking a pose shameless enough to be illegal. The old man's eyes bulged. His nose immediately erupted like a geyser. He toppled backward in his chair, unconscious before he hit the floor like his body had decided it wanted no part of this. Naruto dropped the disguise instantly, jaw tight. Sorry, old man, he muttered, though he wasn't sure if he meant it. He didn't have time. He crossed the room in 3 steps and yanked open the scroll cupboard. His hands moved fast, searching, ignoring everything except the one thing that mattered. And then he saw it. The scroll of seals was enormous, thick, heavy, the kind of thing you didn't mistake for anything else. It felt like stealing a piece of the village's spine. Naruto swallowed. Then he grabbed it anyway. He'd made a sling in advance, rough cloth, knotted tight, and he hoisted the scroll onto his back like a pack. The weight dragged at his shoulders, but he didn't care. All he had to do now was run. Out of the tower, out of the streets, out toward the tree line beyond the village. Far enough that tracking him would take time, and time was the only thing he needed. As far away as possible, as hidden as possible. Hours passed. Back in the tower, Hiruzen finally stirred, blood dried, dignity shattered, and the moment he understood what had happened, the air around him went cold. High-level shinobi were dispatched immediately. Chunin, Jounin, tracking squads. Orders snapped like whips through the village. Find Naruto and find the scroll. This mission is top priority. Meanwhile, deep in the woods, Naruto sat in a clearing lit by moonlight and unrolled the scroll of seals with trembling hands. The ink smelled old, powerful, the kind of writing that felt like it could bite you. He scanned until he found something that made his breath catch. Shadow Clone Jutsu. His heart pounded. His palms began to sweat. His head began to spin. Clones. Of course it had to be clones. Naruto almost laughed. One harsh, broken sound. Then he forced himself to focus. The instructions were different. Not like the academy. Not like the weak imitation that kept failing him. This was real solid clone. He memorized the seals. He read the chakra explanation twice, then 3 times. He didn't rush. He didn't guess. He did it the way he'd learned to do everything now. Slow, controlled, deliberate. Then he stood, hands moved, breath steadied, chakra gathered, shadow clone jutsu. The clearing exploded with smoke. When it cleared, Naruto froze. There were dozens of clones standing around him. Solid. Real. Looking back at him with the same wide blue eyes. No blotchy feet. No smudged hairline. No sickly wobble. Perfect. Naruto's mouth opened, and for a second, he couldn't find sound. Then a grin cracked across his face like the sun breaking through cloud. It was that easy, he whispered. Clones had been the bane of his existence. And this felt like the jutsu had been waiting for him. Like it fit his chakra the way his body fit running. His clones blinked at him, curious. Naruto stared at them, chest rising and falling too fast. Could I learn more? His eyes slid back to the scroll, down the lines of ink, deeper into the forbidden sections. He swallowed. Then he sat back down. Yeah, he muttered, voice low and determined. Worth a shot. Rolling the scroll out further, Naruto licked his lips like there was a steaming bowl of ramen right in front of him. The ink crawled across the parchment in thick, confident strokes. Old, precise, dangerous. The next title revealed itself, and Naruto's grin faltered. 8 trigrams sealing technique. Naruto blinked at it, then stared harder, like the words might rearrange themselves into something simple if he bullied them long enough. Sealing jutsu wasn't an academy subject. Not really. Not the way transformation or substitution was. The few times it had come up, it was always in the tone adults used when they didn't want kids touching something sharp. He barely knew the first thing about Fuinjutsu. Half of what he did know was just rumors, about chains and seals that could bind monsters, about paper tags that could trap chakra like a net. Still, he tried. He spent the next hour hunched over the scroll, tracing the diagrams with his eyes until they burned. He mouthed the terminology quietly, tried to understand the flow, the logic, the shape of it. He even attempted to map it onto what he'd learned about chakra control, steady output, even distribution, no surges. But it didn't click, not the way Shadow Clone had. This wasn't a technique you could brute force. This was a language, and Naruto didn't speak it yet. His shoulders slumped. Then he forced them back up. That's fine. He'd already learned a jutsu. A real one. A forbidden one. That was the deal, right? He exhaled slowly, breath ghosting white in the cold air, and let himself feel it just for a second. Relief. He passed. He was a genin. All he had to do was go back and tell them. Almost as if the world answered his thought. A voice cut through the clearing. Naruto. Naruto jerked, hand snapping toward a kunai he didn't have. Then, Iruka-sensei. Iruka stepped into the moonlight, breath visible, expression tight. He looked like he'd run hard to get here, like the worry had dragged him by the collar through the forest. His eyes locked onto the scroll. You have to bring that back, Iruka said, voice firm but shaken underneath. Right now? To Lord Third. Naruto's smile, small and proud and fragile, died. What do you mean? He blurted, confusion flashing hot. Mizuki-sensei told me if I learn a jutsu from the scroll of seals, I can become a genin. He said it was a special test from you and the headmaster. The words left his mouth and immediately felt wrong. Even the forest seemed to go quieter. Iruka's face changed. Anger, then pain, then something worse, understanding. Naruto. Iruka started. Naruto's throat tightened. His eyes widened as the pieces slid into place with horrible smoothness. A trap. Of course it was. Who else could steal something like this and actually have a chance of getting away? Naruto wasn't loved, but he was tolerated in a way other kids weren't. People expected him to do stupid things. Expected him to get into places he shouldn't. Expected the Hokage to sigh and clean up after him like it was a routine. He got away with things that would have gotten anyone else arrested. So what better tool than Naruto Uzumaki? Naruto's hands clenched so hard his nails bit into his palms. How could I be so? A slow clap echoed from the trees. Once, twice, lazy, mocking. Well, a voice drawled. Looks like you finally figured it out. Mizuki stepped out of the shadows like he belonged there. His smile was the same as always. It didn't reach his eyes. Iruka moved instantly, stepping in front of Naruto without thinking, like his body had decided Naruto was something to shield. Mizuki, Iruka snapped. What are you doing? Mizuki sighed dramatically, as if he was the one being inconvenienced, cleaning up a problem. His gaze slid past Iruka to Naruto. You did great, Naruto. Honestly, I didn't think you'd manage it so fast. Naruto felt a cold chill spread through his entire being. Mizuki-sensei, he said, Voice rough. You lied. Mizuki tilted his head. Lied. He chuckled. Naruto, I used you. There's a difference. Irika's eyes narrowed. This is treason. Spare me. Mizuki's smile sharpened. I just wanted the scroll. And you, his eyes flicked to Naruto again, almost amused, were the perfect key. Naruto swallowed. Rage wanted to rise, loud and wild. The old Naruto rage that exploded first and thought later. But he'd trained. He'd learned. He forced himself to breathe. Mizuki's gaze slid down to the scroll, hunger flashing for the first time. Hand it over, Naruto. I'll make this easy. You can even run away after, if you want. Go back to being the village's little problem. After all, you're the nine-tailed fox. Irika's voice was low, dangerous. Mizuki, that's forbidden. Mizuki's expression shifted, annoyance, then contempt. You always did get sentimental. I'm just saying it how it is, he said, and then his hand snapped forward. A giant shuriken spun out of his grip, whistling through the air straight for Naruto's chest. Naruto's whole body was frozen. Nine-tailed fox? He was time-stretched, not because he was calm, because he'd spent 2 years training when everyone else slept. 2 years forcing his brain to stay sharp under pressure. Yet he couldn't do anything because he was the village's worst tragedy. His eyes were shaking, his vision blurry as the giant shuriken continued to tear through the air. No, he wasn't the Nine Tails. He refused to believe it. Whatever anyone else thought didn't matter. He loved this village despite its flaws, and he was going to become Hokage one day. Irika moved before Naruto could react. Irika-sensei. Irika grabbed Naruto, too late to fully dodge, and Irika threw himself in front of Naruto anyway. Metal bit flesh. Irika grunted, stumbling as the weapon carved into his back. Irika, Naruto shouted, voice cracking like something inside him snapped too. All this training, yet here he stood, frozen in fear, unable to do anything. Mizuki laughed. Touching. Naruto's vision narrowed. No longer would he allow himself to become paralyzed with fear. The clearing blurred at the edges. The foreign chakra inside him pulsed once, steady, cold, clearing his mind the way it always did. But it felt stronger this time. He felt stronger, faster. It was intoxicating. Naruto's hands flew into various seals. Shadow clone jutsu. Smoke erupted. Not one, not three, over 100. All the Narutos burst into existence across the clearing, circling Mizuki like wolves, solid, real, eyes hard. Mizuki's smile faltered for the first time. What? Irika, clutching his wound, stared at the clones like he'd been punched in the lungs. Naruto didn't look away from Mizuki. I learned it, he said, voice shaking with rage more than pride. From the scroll, Mizuki's face twisted. Impossible. You couldn't even do a basic clone jutsu. Naruto bared his teeth. Yeah, then he stepped forward. And for once, he didn't charge like a fool. He signaled. 10 clones moved right. 10 went left. Another 5 dropped low, scooping snow and dirt to kick up a blinding spray. Naruto's brain ran like a mission board. Angles, timing, pressure. Mizuki recovered fast. He was a Chunin-level ninja, maybe higher, and his hands snapped into seals. But Naruto had numbers as well as the element of surprise. More than that, Naruto had control. Mizuki swung his chain weapon in a vicious arc, shredding 5 clones into smoke. Another 5 clones took their places instantly, fainting high. Mizuki bit, raised his guard, and Naruto slid in low, sweeping his leg, knocking Mizuki off balance for half a heartbeat. Half a heartbeat was all a ninja needed. Even as Mizuki tried to retaliate, Naruto kept moving. Irika, grimacing through pain, flicked a kunai, not to kill, but to redirect Mizuki's attack. The blade struck the chain's anchor point, throwing Mizuki's weapon offline. Mizuki's eyes widened. Naruto's clone slammed into him from the side, and another hit his shoulder, and another hooked his arm. Mizuki snarled, chakra flaring as he tried to break free. Naruto stepped in close, eyes ice bright. You didn't just trick me, Naruto said quietly, inwardly seething with rage. You tried to make me your tool. You tried to manipulate my mind. Then he drove a punch into Mizuki's ribs, not strong enough to crush, but placed right. A clean strike that knocked the breath out of him. Mizuki staggered. 5 clones wrapped him up, pinning his arms and legs. Irika limped forward, blood dark on his vest, and slammed the butt of his kunai into the side of Mizuki's head. Mizuki crumpled, eyes rolling. Silence fell into the clearing like snow. Naruto stood over him, chest heaving, hands trembling. Not from fear, from the effort of not doing something worse. Irika swayed, one hand pressed to his back. Naruto spun toward him instantly. Irika-sensei, you're bleeding. Irika's expression was tight, but his eyes were steady. I'm fine, he lied. And then, more softly, "You did well. I'm proud of you, Naruto." Naruto froze. This was something he had never had before. Not praise for being loud, not praise for being entertaining, praise for being capable. Back in the Hokage Tower, Hiruzen Sarutobi sat before the crystal ball, his face unreadable, pipe unlit in his fingers. Yinbiyu knelt behind him, waiting for orders. In the sphere, Naruto stood beside Iruka, clones dissolving into smoke. Mizuki lay unconscious in the snow, bound by improvised restraints. Hiruzen watched Naruto's face, watched the fury settle into control, watched the way Naruto reached for Iruka without hesitation. The old man's eyes softened by a fraction. The boy had grown by himself for better or for worse. He exhaled. "Call off the search," Hiruzen said. One of the Yanbiyu shifted. "Lord Hokage, I said call it off." His voice left no room for argument. "Send a recovery unit for Mizuki. Quietly. And prepare medical support for Iruka." "Yes, Lord Hokage." The Yanbiyu vanished. In the clearing, Naruto swallowed and carefully rolled the scroll back up, hands gentler now, like he finally understood the weight of what he'd taken. It was a mistake and a lesson. Maybe he still wasn't as smart as he thought he had become. "I'll bring it back," Naruto said, voice rough. "Right now." Iruka nodded once, wincing as he moved. "I'm coming with you." Naruto hesitated, then shook his head hard. "No, you're hurt." Iruka tried to argue, but Naruto's gaze was stubborn, focused, not panicked. Iruka sighed through his teeth. "Fine." His eyes sharpened. "But Naruto, don't run from the Hokage. Tell him the truth." Naruto's throat tightened. He nodded anyway. Then he ran, fast, silent, the scroll strapped to his back like a promise. By the time the tower lights came into view, the village was still searching, but the search felt different now. Less frantic, less sharp, as if the storm had been quietly redirected without anyone knowing why. Naruto slipped inside. This time, he didn't kick the door open like a prank. He walked into the Hokage Tower and trundled towards the Hokage's office, swallowed, and knocked. From inside came the calm, tired voice of the third. "Enter." Naruto stepped in and set the scroll of seals down carefully, like it might explode if he disrespected it. Hiruzen looked at him for a long moment. Naruto forced himself not to flinch. "I brought it back," Naruto said, voice steady despite the tremor in his fingers. "And Mizuki, he tricked me." Hiruzen's gaze was heavy, ancient. "I know," he said quietly. Naruto's heart thudded. He didn't know whether that meant forgiveness or punishment, maybe even disappointment. The two of them stood in silence. Naruto didn't know what to do with his hands, so he curled them into fists and pretended it was confidence. The scroll of seals sat on the Hokage's desk like a sleeping beast, quiet, heavy, accusing. Hiruzen didn't look at it. He stood by the window with his back to Naruto, staring down at the village lights like he was counting all the problems he couldn't fix in a single lifetime. The silence pressed in, crushing. Worse than yelling. Naruto had ridden the high of Iruka's praise like it was sunlight, and now this quiet felt like falling back into the cold. His mind ran at full speed, searching for the right words and finding only wrong ones. Iruka had said he needed to tell the truth, but Hiruzen had already said he knew Mizuki tricked him. So what was Naruto supposed to say? Sorry for being easy to use? Sorry for wanting to pass so badly I stopped thinking? He swallowed. "I'm sorry," Naruto forced out at last, voice small in the big office. "I don't really have an excuse." It was the first honest apology he'd ever given. Not one of his loud sorry's that were really just noise. This one felt like it cost him something. Hiruzen stayed quiet for a moment longer, like he was deciding whether to be Hokage or just be an old man. Then he turned. Up close, the wrinkles in his face didn't make him look weak. They made him look worn, like someone who'd been holding a roof up for too long. "No, Naruto," Hiruzen said, and his voice wasn't angry. It was tired. "There is no need to apologize." Naruto blinked, thrown. "If anything," Hiruzen continued, "I should apologize. I wanted you to grow strong on your own." His eyes sharpened, not at Naruto, but at himself. But it was foolish to leave a child by himself. Naruto stared at him, not because he was the Hokage, not because of the title or the office, because of what he'd said. Naruto had resented the old man for years. The monthly allowance felt like a transaction, not care. A box checked and pushed aside. And yet, Naruto had never really let himself consider what it meant to be responsible for the entire village. Tens of thousands of lives weighed on his shoulders. Naruto shook his head hard, like he could fling the confusion out. "It's fine," he said quickly. Then the words tripped into something familiar, something safer. You can repay me by handing that seat over to me in the future. A goofy grin stretched across his face before he could stop it. For the first time that night, Hiruzen's shoulders eased. He let out a soft chuckle, and the air in the room loosened like a knot being untied. Well, Hiruzen said, amused. You'll need to become a genin first, won't you? Naruto's grin faltered. Reality slapped him clean across the face. He hadn't passed. Not the real exam. He'd stolen a forbidden scroll. He'd attacked a Hokage with a transformation jutsu that should have gotten him thrown in a cell. He was lucky if he was going to see the academy again. Naruto's eyes dropped. Hiruzen's gaze flicked toward the door behind Naruto. Turn around. Naruto did, half expecting to be told to leave. His thoughts derailed as soon as he saw who stood there. Iruka. He looked rough, bandaged, sore, still pale around the edges, but he was standing on his own 2 feet. In his hand, neatly presented like something sacred, was a forehead protector, the leaf symbol etched into the metal surface. Naruto's throat closed. Iruka stepped forward and stopped in front of him. His expression was warm in a way Naruto wasn't used to receiving without strings attached. Congratulations, Iruka said. Naruto Uzumaki. You have passed the examination and henceforth you are a genin. Naruto's breath caught. Iruka lifted the forehead protector and tied it around Naruto's head with practiced hands. Firm, careful, like he was making sure it was real. You successfully performed an advanced clone jutsu, Iruka elaborated, voice steady. Lord Third decided you've passed under extenuating circumstances. Naruto's vision blurred. He blinked hard, furious with his own eyes. The tears didn't fall. He refused to let them. But they sat there anyway, burning, stubborn. He swallowed and replaced the wobble in his face with the biggest grin he'd ever worn. Told you I'd do it. Iruka snorted softly. Yeah, sure you did. Hiruzen's mouth tugged upward. Returning the scroll was the correct choice, he said. Mizuki has been dealt with. And Naruto straightened instinctively. Don't mistake mercy for ignorance. Hiruzen finished, not unkindly. You still have a lot to learn. Naruto nodded, serious for a heartbeat. I understand, Lord Third. Then Iruka's expression shifted into something Naruto recognized as a weapon. And, Iruka added, to celebrate. I'm treating you. Naruto's head snapped up. Ramen. Ichiraku. Iruka confirmed, already regretting it. Naruto exploded. Yes, the hours quickly passed. It was just past midnight by the time Naruto finally peeled himself away from Ichiraku. He'd eaten until his stomach felt like a warm weight anchoring him to the world, until even he couldn't justify another bowl. Iruka had walked him halfway home, and then they parted ways. The village went dark, lights clicking out one by one. But as always, Naruto stayed awake. Not that he had much of a say in this matter. He stood under a street lamp for a moment longer than he needed to, fingers brushing the metal plate of his new forehead protector. It was cool against his skin. Real. Heavy. Proof. Genin. A week until orientation and team assignments. A week until he stopped being just a name on a class list and became something the village would actually use. A week was perfect. He had one last stretch where he didn't have missions, teammates, or a sensei watching his every mistake. One last stretch where he could train in the dark at the academy, improving himself in one final stint before his life changed forever. So he moved, quiet feet, familiar routes. The academy roof greeted him like an old habit. He slipped through the same window he'd used 100 times and dropped into an empty classroom. The room smelled like chalk and old wood. Moonlight laid pale stripes over the desks. Naruto lit a small candle, not because he needed it. He could see fine in the dark, but because the flame made the room feel less like a cemetery. He'd been splitting his nights the same way for years. 3 hours physical, 3 hours mental, because it was simple, and because simple had been enough when he was just trying to stop being weak. But lately his training had started to feel flat. Not easy. Never easy. Just repetitive, like he was hammering the same nail into the same spot and wondering why the wall wouldn't move. He'd gotten strong. Fast. Tough. Well, at least compared to before. And still there were gaps. Gaps many ninja could slip through with one clean motion. Gaps that would have nearly cost him everything today if Iruka hadn't stepped in. Naruto sat at the teacher's desk with a piece of paper and a stubby pencil. For a long moment, he just stared, jaw tight, as if planning was an enemy he could intimidate. Then he wrote at the top in awkward, aggressive letters. Training plan. He stared at it, then added underneath. No failing. His mouth twitched. That was more like him. He leaned back and let his mind run. Not wild. Not messy, but focused. He had a unique benefit. He didn't need sleep. That didn't mean his body didn't need recovery. That didn't mean his chakra was infinite. And it definitely didn't mean he could keep training until bored and expect to keep improving. So Naruto built his nights like missions. He started with the first thing he'd always skipped, a warm-up that wasn't just sprinting until his lungs hurt. He'd learned the hard way that the cold didn't care how stubborn he was. Tight muscles tore, ankles rolled, wrists sprained. One bad injury could steal weeks. So from now on, the first part of his night would be quiet and controlled. Loosen joints, stretch hips and ankles, wake up his legs with light footwork patterns, and getting his breathing steady. Not exciting, not heroic, but it meant he'd last, become more flexible, less injury-prone. After that came the real work, strength and speed, but he stopped thinking of it as one long punishment session and started treating it like pieces with purpose. Some nights would be legs and core, the unglamorous foundation, holding stances until his thighs nearly gave out, squats and lunges until his knees screamed, short hill sprints that made the air feel thin. The kind of work that turned "I can run fast" into "I can still move when my body wants to collapse." Other nights would be pushing strength, hands, shoulders, chest, push-ups in different hand positions, dips off the edge of a desk, shoulder stability drills, so he didn't wreck himself the first time he actually fought someone stronger than a classmate. And the next night would be pulling strength and grip, hanging from beams, climbing ropes if he could rig one, hauling himself up and down until his forearms went numb. Shinobi didn't just punch. Shinobi grabbed, held, dragged, escaped. Naruto didn't like thinking about being grabbed. Sometimes Naruto would find weights or sandbags he could use to make everything that much harder. That made it important. He'd rotate the focus instead of smashing the same muscles every night, because rotating wasn't going easy. Rotating meant he could train harder tomorrow without breaking today. When his body hit that sweet point, sweat pouring, muscles hot, breath loud, he'd switch to weapons. Not the old throw until angry. Now he'd start with smooth draws, over and over, hand to pouch, grip, pull, release. No wasted motion. Then accuracy work at different distances, different angles, forcing his eyes and hands to agree. Then movement throws, sidestep and flick, turn and release, jump and throw, because fights weren't polite enough to let him stand still. He had improved at that a lot. He would go as far as saying there was no one in the academy who had half as much skill with throwing weapons. And after weapons, when his arms were heavy and his fingers ached, he'd do chakra control. Not because it was fun, because it was his weakest ability before, and he refused to ever let it happen again. He'd keep the leaf and coin exercises for precision, steady, clean output. He'd tree walk and wall stick not just for height, but for steadiness under movement. Shift weight, shift chakra, keep balance. And he'd add something new, water walking. There were often buckets of water around the academy, and Naruto had finally started trying to walk on water. It wasn't easy. In fact, his feet always sunk into the bucket. It was going to take some time to get this down. But Naruto had plenty of it. He could even do this at home, while studying seals when he got good enough. Then came the part that made Naruto scowl just thinking about it. Mental work. He didn't just mean study until annoyed. He meant reading tactics like they were weapons. How to spot feints. How to bait a response. How to fight someone faster than you without letting them choose the rhythm. He'd go over basic healing too, because if Irika hadn't saved him, that shuriken could have killed him. Naruto hated the way that thought tasted, but he didn't let himself spit it out. The problem was he didn't always have a dead fish flying around to practice on. It was also one of the most time-consuming techniques there was, although many textbooks referred to it as the ultimate chakra control exercise. And finally, sealing. Because of that scroll, because of those words, 8 trigrams, sitting in his head like a locked door. He didn't remember all of it, but he could always request to learn it considering he had seen it before. But he didn't fool himself. He wasn't going to become a seal master in a week. That wasn't realistic. So he decided what he could do. Lay a foundation. He'd practice the script until his lines stopped looking wobbly. Copy symbols until they stopped looking like scribbles and started looking like meaning. He'd work on chakra ink output. Thin, consistent lines, no surges, because a seal didn't care how determined you were if your chakra lines wobbled. And he'd start with storage seals. Pebbles. Paper. A single kunai. Not because he wanted to be a seal master overnight, because if he couldn't store a pebble reliably, he had no business dreaming about 8 trigrams. When Naruto finished shaping it in his head, he looked down at the paper again. He hadn't written much, just the title and a few rough lines. But the plan was there now, solid and heavy inside him. He was going to stop training like a kid with too much energy and start training like a ninja with a goal. He blew out a slow breath, watching it fog in the candlelight. Then, because he knew himself, he added one last rule to the bottom, almost grudgingly. He would recover on purpose, stretch after, cool down, eat more than ramen when he could, take one lighter night every few days where he focused on technique instead of tearing himself apart. Naruto stared at that rule for a long moment like it had personally insulted him. Then he nodded once, sharp. Fine, he muttered to the empty room. The candle flickered, and deep inside him, that foreign chakra pulsed, steady, patient, like it was listening, like it wanted to see whether Naruto's discipline was real or just another thing he'd burn out on. Naruto stood, rolling his shoulders, feeling the familiar itch of motion crawling up his spine. A week left, 1 week of night training on academy grounds before he could use official training fields. 1 week to sharpen the blade he'd been forging in secret. He'd been doing it for almost 3 years. He wouldn't quit now just because he had more on his plate. After arriving back home, it began. He picked up a brush and began. The week passed in the blink of an eye, and before Naruto could properly register that it was over, he was walking back through the academy doors. It felt wrong. For years, this place had been a cage. Chalk dust, whispered insults. The same lessons repeated until his brain wanted to crawl out of his skull. But at night it had been something else. His second home. An almost peaceful sanctuary. A place where nobody watched him fail. The week itself had been strange, even by Naruto standards. The training had gone smoothly. Smoothly in the way pain could become routine if you did it often enough. But somewhere in the middle of it, he'd met the third Hokage's grandson, a loud little brat with too much confidence and not enough sense. The kid had run his mouth. Naruto had smacked him on the head without thinking, and ever since then the brat had been orbiting him like Naruto was the most interesting thing in the village. And Naruto had finally kept his promise to himself. New clothes, nothing flashy, nothing loud. That was the whole point. A black t-shirt, black technical cargos, a dark gray jacket. Okay, he couldn't let all the orange die. On the back of the jacket was an orange leaf symbol, bold enough to be Naruto, restrained enough to be in ninja's clothing. As he slid into the classroom, he stared blankly at the board. For a heartbeat, he didn't see chalk marks and lesson notes. He saw ceiling scripts. He saw the lines he'd drawn there last night, candlelight trembling over the wood as he practiced chakra ink control until his fingers cramped. He'd missed that board. Missed the quiet of owning the room when no one else was there to fill it with noise. A presence drifted into his space on the right. Naruto turned his head. Shikamaru was staring at him like Naruto was a rodent found in the corner of his house. "What are you doing here, Naruto?" Shikamaru asked, voice lazy but eyes sharp. "This isn't for dropouts. You can't be here unless you graduated." One of Naruto's eyes twitched as he failed to keep a straight face. "Open your eyes, Shikamaru." He tilted his head just enough for the metal plate to catch the light. Regulation headband. Shikamaru's gaze flicked to it. His yawn died halfway. Naruto's mouth curled into a smug grin. "We graduated together. How do you like that?" Shikamaru blinked once, slow. "What a drag," he muttered, like that explained everything. Before he could say more, the door slammed open. "I'm first. No, I'm first." Naruto glanced over to see Sakura and Ino arguing as they barreled into the room like the world would end if either of them arrived second. Naruto let out a quiet sigh. They were both objectively pretty, but their personalities had a way of sanding beauty down into irritation. And Naruto realized something without any drama attached to it. His little crush on Sakura was gone. Not snapped, not burned away, just worn out, replaced by other priorities, by late nights, by goals that didn't care who smiled at him. He looked back at the board, letting their shouting blur into background noise as his mind drifted to something more useful. Timing, footwork, the way most people telegraphed a strike with their shoulders before they even knew they were doing it. He also realized, with a faint annoyance, that he had one real jutsu in his arsenal. Shadow clones, useful as hell, but still only one. He'd fix that. Add it to the list. If he really wanted the Hokage's seat someday, he couldn't rely on a single hammer and pretend every problem was a nail. The third supposedly knew a ridiculous number of jutsu. Naruto would need his own library in his head. Naruto. Footsteps. Fast. Naruto turned and found Sakura storming toward him like he'd personally offended her existence. "Move," she snapped, eyes flashing. Naruto stared at her, confused for half a second, then followed her line of sight. To his left, Sasuke was sitting there, quiet as a shadow, face blank, like the whole room was beneath him. Naruto met Sasuke's eyes. Sasuke looked back with the same empty calm. He gave everything. Not a plea, Not a request, just nothing really. Naruto didn't care enough to fight over a seat, and he cared even less about Sakura's screaming. He stood up. Sorry. He didn't even finish the word before Sakura and Ino shoved past him like he was furniture. Naruto exhaled through his nose. All right then. He scanned the room and found an empty seat near the top. Quieter. Less traffic. Better sight lines. He dropped into it and let his posture sag like he was bored. He wasn't. He was already working angles in his head. Then, softly, I like your new jacket, Naruto. Naruto turned. Hinata Hyuga sat a few seats away, fingers nervously touching together as if speaking had cost her something. Her cheeks were already pink, like she regretted it the second the words left her. Naruto smiled, and it came easier than he expected. Yeah, he said, lifting his shoulder slightly to show it off. New look. Kind of figured, if I'm a ninja now, I should at least dress like one. A grin tugged at his mouth. Mostly. Hinata's eyes flicked to the orange symbol on his back, and she looked like she wanted to smile, but didn't know if she was allowed. Naruto liked Hinata. She was nice. Quiet in a way that didn't feel like judgment. Weird sometimes, sure, but Naruto didn't exactly belong in the normal category either. Before they could say more, the door slid open again. Irika entered, along with the third Hokage. The room snapped into attention, conversations dying mid-syllable. The Hokage's presence did that, even when he wasn't trying. The graduation ceremony moved quickly. Formal words, formal smiles, the kind of speech that made it feel official. Real. Naruto's fingers brushed his headband again, as if checking it hadn't vanished. Then came the teams. Irika's voice carried itself cleanly. Squad 7. Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, and, he paused, just long enough for the air to stretch. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto's eye twitched. Of course, Sakura actually cheered, loud enough to make heads turn, like this was the greatest day of her life. Being paired with Sasuke, Naruto didn't bother reacting. He just let out a slow breath and told himself it could be worse. It could always be worse. Still, as the other teams were called, Naruto's gaze flicked to Hinata. I guess it could be. He muttered. He wasn't sure if that was true, though. It seems we aren't on the same team, Hinata, raising his voice slightly so Hinata could hear him. Hinata went red instantly, like she'd caught fire. Naruto didn't even get the chance to feel awkward about it, because Irika kept going. Squad 8. Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburame. Hinata's shoulders straightened like she was bracing for a storm. In Squad 10. Shikamaru Nara, Choji Akimichi, Ino Yamanaka. Irika finished, then gestured. Your squad leaders will arrive soon to collect you. One by one, Jonin came in. Names were called. Groups left, until only Squad 7 remained. Naruto, Sasuke, Sakura. Time dragged. Minutes. Then an hour. Then enough time that Sakura started pacing and complaining. Sasuke sat like a statue, brooding like always. Naruto put his head on his arms on the desk like he was sleeping. He wasn't. He couldn't, of course. Instead, he did what he'd learned to do. He worked. He ran fights through his mind. Visualized footwork, counters, angles. Practiced hand seals without moving his hands. Drew ceiling lines in his imagination until he could see the curves cleanly, like they were carved into the air. His body looked lazy. His mind was sprinting. Eventually, the door creaked open. A tall man stepped in with spiky gray hair, a face mask, and a headband tilted to cover his left eye. He looked casual. Too casual. Like being late was a hobby. Naruto lifted his head. A mummy, he said without thinking. The Jonin turned toward him. One eye curved into something that might have been a smile. My first impression of you all is... He paused like he was reading a script only he had. I hate you. Sakura's face crumpled in horror. Naruto just blinked. Meet me on the rooftop, the man added. Then he vanished in a flicker, like he'd never been there. Naruto stood slowly and stretched, unbothered. Sakura was still frozen, like her soul had been insulted. Sasuke didn't wait. He hopped out the window and disappeared upward. Naruto followed at a normal pace. No rush. He'd been waiting for hours. Another minute wouldn't kill him. On the rooftop, the three of them finally took seats along the stairs. Their Jonin instructor sat near the edge, reading a small orange book like the world didn't exist. Without looking up, he said, now that we're all here, introduce yourselves. Naruto's face creased with annoyance. Of course he'd do it like that. Sakura spoke up first, forcing politeness through clenched teeth. Shouldn't you introduce yourself first? What are we even supposed to say? The Jonin sighed like answering questions was exhausting. He lowered the book slightly. Fine. His voice was easy, almost bored. I'm Kakashi Hatake. Things I like and dislike. I don't feel like telling you. Dreams for the future, haven't thought about it. Hobbies. I have plenty. He looked at Naruto. You. On the right. Naruto stared at him for a beat. This guy was unbelievably lazy. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, Naruto said. I like ramen and jutsu. I hate waiting without anything to do. His grin sharpened. I'm going to become Hokage. My hobbies are trying. Different ramen. It was like a half-truth. He couldn't allow all his cards to be shown even if it was his new sensei. Kakashi's response was unimpressed enough to be insulting. He pointed at Sakura. You, Pinky. Sakura's introduction was. Sakura's introduction. Naruto tuned most of it out. It was hard to care when the room's air still tasted like a challenge. Then Sasuke spoke. Short. Cold. Focused. My name is Sasuke Uchiha, he said. I don't like much. And I don't like a lot of things. What I have isn't a goal, but something I will make into a reality. I will kill a certain someone and restore my clan. The silence after that was loud. Even Kakashi paused. Then he clapped once, breaking it like glass. Good. You're all unique. He tucked his book away. You have a mission tomorrow. A survival exercise. Sakura perked up. We did those at the academy. Kakashi's eye curved again. It's nothing like the academy. His voice turned almost cheerful. Of the 27 graduates, only 9 will be accepted as genin. This test exists to thin out the numbers. Naruto went still. Only 9. Kakashi continued as if he was announcing the weather. Your chances of failing are high. Sakura's face drained. Sasuke didn't react. Naruto's mind started moving immediately, faster than his body. Kakashi held up one finger. One more thing. Don't eat before tomorrow. You'll throw up. Naruto's stomach made a confused little flip. Don't eat? Before a survival test? That meant the test wasn't just sparring. It was stress. Movement. Running. Getting hit. Maybe traps. Maybe starvation as pressure. Be there at 5 in the morning. Kakashi finished. Bring your ninja gear. Then, just like that, he vanished, leaving the 3 of them sitting in the dark with a bomb dropped between them. Naruto stared at the empty spot where Kakashi had been. Only 9 accepted. That wasn't a test. That was a filter. Sakura started panicking out loud. Sasuke stood and left without a word. Naruto stayed seated a moment longer, jaw tight, thoughts clean and sharp. Whilst everyone else would go home and try to sleep off their nerves, Naruto couldn't. So he would do the only thing he'd known these past few years, and that's train. He would train, study tactics. There had to be something on survival exercises. Something more in depth than academy learnings. For the first time, Naruto took his night training somewhere new. Not the academy roof. Not the classroom he'd turned into a private war zone. The official training grounds. Wide, open, built for shinobi. The hours tore past. The forest swallowed his breath. The ground ate the sound of his footwork, and his muscles burned with that familiar, honest pain that told him he was sharpening something real. At 4 in the morning, he stopped, just in case. It was stupid, technically. People were going to see him train during the day now. He was a genin. That was the point. But the nights had been his alone for almost 3 years. A secret carved into routine. He wasn't ready to let it go just because the rules had changed. Naruto sat with his back against a tree, let his breath slow, and closed his eyes. Image training. He ran fights through his mind like scrolls unrolling. Ambushes, traps, decoys, survival tactics. Everything he'd studied and everything he'd guessed. He pictured Kakashi's stance, the way he'd moved, the way his eye had smiled while his body promised violence. Naruto wasn't going back to the academy. Not when he was this close to the next step toward Hokage. He felt good, strong, fast, awake in a way that wasn't just physical. He'd never trusted his own body like this before. Never trusted his own thinking. And he knew, quietly, with a calm he didn't show, he was stronger than what you could tell at first sight. Stronger than everyone thought. He kept that to himself, though. Because if there was one thing Naruto had learned from that deception is a ninja's best friend scroll, it was this. Let them underestimate you. Let them laugh. Let them relax. An hour later, footsteps crunched through grass. Naruto opened his eyes as Sasuke and Sakura approached. Hey guys, Naruto said, lifting a hand. Ready for the test? Sakura laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd heard all morning. Did you sleep out here, Naruto? Naruto's mouth twitched. If only she knew. Sasuke didn't answer. He didn't even look at Naruto properly. Gaze fixed somewhere past him like the world was a distraction. Naruto sighed and leaned back against the tree, closing his eyes again. Sakura fluttered around Sasuke like attention could replace skill. Sasuke stayed silent and distant. Naruto, on the other hand, went back to image training. He replayed the various survival exercises in his head, again and again, adding variations. His opponent attacking first, his opponent waiting. What if they setting traps, clones, or genjutsu? Naruto didn't have real experience, But he had textbooks, observation, and the one thing most people didn't. Time. 6 o'clock came and went. No Kakashi. Sakura started complaining. Even Naruto's patience frayed. Waiting gave him time to think, sure, but his body wouldn't stay warm if they just sat there forever. The morning chill sank into the bones. To Naruto's annoyance, the Jounin still didn't show after 10 o'clock. Noon arrived before Kakashi did, and when he finally appeared, he strolled in like he hadn't just stolen half their day. Naruto's eye twitched. You're late. Kakashi's one visible eye curved. Ah well, an old lady needed help, so I walked her home. Naruto didn't even think. His hand snapped, and a shuriken flashed through the air. No killing intent, but there was definitely hope that it would hit that annoying eye smile. Kakashi caught it between thumb and forefinger like it was nothing, like he'd plucked a falling leaf out of the wind. He spun it once on his finger, bored, then flicked it back. The shuriken buried itself in the tree trunk behind Naruto's head with a sharp thunk, close enough that the vibration trembled through Naruto's hair. Kakashi didn't even look at the tree. Naruto felt the message settle into his skin. Too fast. He'd known that the Jounin was strong already, but knowing and seeing were different. Now, Kakashi said mildly, as if they were discussing the weather. Let me explain the test before you attack me so brazenly. He held up 2 small bells. They jingled softly in the air, innocent little things for how much weight Kakashi put on them. This is called the bell test, Kakashi said. You have 3 hours. Whoever takes a bell from me passes. Naruto's eyes narrowed. So did Sasuke's. 2 bells, and 3 people don't go. Sakura asked it out loud, because someone had to. Sensei, there are only 2 bells. Kakashi's eyes smiled wider. Correct. That's because one of you won't be passing. The air shifted. Sakura went pale. Sasuke's gaze sharpened. Naruto felt his stomach tighten, not from fear, more like irritation at how obvious the trap was starting to smell. Before anyone could argue, Kakashi said one word. Begin. They moved instantly. 3 genin disappeared into the surrounding forest, each trying to erase their presence the way the academy books always preached. Naruto did it best, not because he was naturally stealthy, but because he'd practiced it when nobody was watching. He knew how to slow his breathing, how to place his feet, how to hide his chakra. The forest swallowed him. From the clearing, Kakashi barely moved. He tucked his hands in his pockets, pulled his orange book back out, and, insultingly, started reading. He tracked them anyway. He felt Sakura first, nervous, stiff, trying too hard to be quiet. Then Sasuke, controlled, intense, like a blade pretending it was patient. Then Naruto. Naruto was harder, not invisible, not even close, but it was textbook mixed with what seemed like experience in a controlled environment. Kakashi's thoughts flickered to the files he'd skimmed that morning. Sasuke, top marks, obvious talent. Sakura, strong theory, average practical. Naruto, inconsistent record, then sudden jump, then extenuating circumstances scribbled in the margins like someone didn't want to write the truth. Kakashi's eyes slid slightly, scanning the trees without looking like he was scanning. Interesting. He decided to make it look like he'd let his guard down. A kunai flashed out of the underbrush, straight for Kakashi's head. Kakashi caught it without looking up from the page, spun it once, then flicked it into the dirt at his feet. A warning, not a counterattack. The test wasn't about whether they could hit him. It was about whether they could think as a group, as a team. Kakashi turned a page. In his peripheral vision, Sasuke moved, hands blurred through seals, fast enough to impress. Chakra gathered. Fire style, fireball jutsu. A sphere of flame roared out of the trees, bright and hungry. Kakashi didn't even flinch until it was almost on him. Then poof, a substitution jutsu. The fireball slammed into a log, exploding bark and sparks. Smoke billowed. Sasuke launched in after it, using the momentary cover. Kunai in hand, feet fast, ice cold. Kakashi stepped out of the smoke behind him like he'd been there the whole time. Sasuke twisted, slashing. Kakashi leaned aside with the smallest movement, like avoiding effort was a personal philosophy. Sasuke's blade cut air. Kakashi tapped Sasuke's shoulder with 2 fingers. Too obvious. Kakashi murmured, still calm, and Sasuke's body jolted as Kakashi swept his leg and dumped him onto his back. Sasuke rolled immediately, back on his feet, angry. Kakashi went right back to reading. Sasuke attacked again and again. Each time, Kakashi gave him just enough resistance to keep him pushing, just enough humiliation to keep him reckless, never fully crushing him, never revealing everything. Naruto watched from deeper in the trees, eyes narrowed. While Sasuke fought, Naruto's mind ran numbers. 27 graduates, 9 accepted. But if 2 from each team passed, that would be 18. 6 teams, and then what? They just Reassign everyone into random pairs? But what about only 3 teams passing? No, that didn't make sense. A cold clarity slid into place. It wasn't about taking a bell. It was about the team. Kakashi wasn't testing who was strongest. He was testing who could stop thinking like 3 solo fighters and start thinking like 1 unit. Naruto exhaled slowly. He shifted through the trees until he found Sakura, still hidden, still tense, still watching Sasuke like the bell test was a romantic tragedy. Naruto slid in close, voice low. Sakura. Sakura didn't even turn fully. Shoo. Yule. Naruto grabbed her collar and hauled her back behind the trunk before she could step out like an idiot. His other hand clamped over her mouth for half a heartbeat, just long enough to stop her from yelping. Her eyes went wide with fury. Naruto leaned in and hissed, "Listen, this test is a trap." He loosened his hand so she could breathe, but kept his grip on her collar so she couldn't bolt out and ruin it. Sakura whispered harshly, "Let go." Naruto didn't. "Have you ever seen a 2-person Genin team?" he said. "Think. If only 2 pass, what does the third do? Go back to the academy? And then what? They reorganize everything? For what reason? Teams are the whole point." Sakura froze, anger stalling. Naruto's eyes were hard. "They want us to fight each other. That's the trick." Her brows knit. "And why should I believe you?" Because Naruto had been the class clown for years. Because Naruto wasn't supposed to be the one doing the thinking. Because believing him meant admitting he'd changed. Naruto swallowed his irritation and forced his voice to stay steady. "Because if we don't work together, we lose. And if you're worried I'll steal a bell and leave you behind." He let go of her collar. Then he raised his hands slightly, palms open, an offering. "If we get bells," Naruto said, "you and Sasuke can take them. You two will stay on the same team, and I'll go back to the academy." Sakura stared at him, suspicious, weighing. Then, slowly, she nodded. "Fine," she whispered. "So what do we do?" Naruto's mind clicked into motion. Not a fancy plan. Not a perfect plan. A real plan. "We create openings," Naruto said. "Kakashi's too fast for us. So we force him to react." He pointed, quick and precise. "Sasuke's already engaging him. I'll jump in and disrupt his rhythm. Make him dodge. Make him reposition. Make him show patterns. You stay hidden and throw when he commits. Not when he's ready. When he's moving." Sakura frowned. "He'll dodge." "Good," Naruto whispered. "Dodging still costs time. Time is all we need." Sakura's grip tightened on her kunai. "And if he comes for me?" Naruto's smile was thin. "Stay on the move. Never stay in one place. Make him chase shadows." Sakura inhaled, nervous but focused now. "Okay." Naruto didn't give her time to lose the nerve again. He moved. He burst out of the trees with a sudden barrage of shuriken. Fast, widespread, not aimed to kill, but aimed to hurt. Kakashi's eye flicked up. Shuriken screamed through the air. Kakashi shifted, body flowing sideways, letting some pass, flicking others away with lazy precision. But the moment he moved, Sasuke was there. Sasuke lunged in, kunai flashing toward the bells. Kakashi twisted, just barely, avoiding the strike. And Naruto was already closing from the other side, low to the ground, forcing Kakashi's attention to split. For the first time since the test began, Kakashi stopped reading. That alone felt like a victory. "Now that's more like it," Kakashi murmured. Naruto's grin sharpened. "Good. Let him pay attention." Because now it wasn't 3 genin scrambling in the dirt. Now it was a team trying to drag a jonin off balance, one opening at a time. Naruto shifted his position until he was opposite Sasuke, with Kakashi between them. Not side by side. Not one behind the other. A line. If Kakashi faced Naruto, Sasuke had his back. If Kakashi turned to Sasuke, Naruto had his flank. It wasn't perfect. Kakashi was a jonin, not a training dummy, but it forced him to choose where to look. Naruto caught Sasuke's eye and jerked his chin, subtle. "Opposite. Don't crowd. Make him turn." Sasuke's gaze narrowed. For a moment Naruto thought he'd ignore it out of pride. Then Sasuke slid into position without a word. "Good." Naruto inhaled once, steady, and surged forward. He went in like he meant to throw hands. Fast steps, shoulders loose, fists ready. But the first punch wasn't meant to land. It was meant to make Kakashi react. Kakashi turned with lazy smoothness and cut low with a sweeping kick. Naruto had been waiting for it. He snapped a kunai from his pouch and threw it down toward Kakashi's ankle. Not to stab, but to force a shift. Kakashi's weight dipped to avoid it, balance changing for a fraction of a second. That fraction was enough for Sasuke to lunge in from the opposite side. Kunai aimed for the bells. Kakashi's visible eye tracked Sasuke, calm, amused, and his other hand moved like it had all the time in the world. He caught Sasuke's wrist, then blocked Naruto's follow-up strike with the same motion, palm snapping out to stop Naruto's forearm cold. At the same time, Kakashi finally slid his orange book back into its holder. He'd stopped pretending. Better, Kakashi murmured. Naruto felt a flash of optimism, and then it died as Kakashi planted one hand on the ground, spun his hips, and in a single fluid motion used their own momentum against them. He wrenched both their arms offline and prepared to fling them like they were children play fighting. Then, a kunai sliced toward Kakashi's back. Kakashi's head tilted like he'd heard the wind change. He released Naruto and Sasuke instantly and sprang upward, letting the blade pass beneath him. Naruto and Sasuke stumbled back, freed, not because they'd earned it, but because Kakashi had decided he didn't feel like holding them anymore. Naruto didn't waste the breath he'd been given. His hands flashed into a familiar cross seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Smoke erupted. 10 Narutos appeared in a heartbeat, solid and sharp-eyed. No wobble. No blur. The kind of clones that made the air feel crowded. 8 of them launched at once, leaping high and descending around Kakashi like a closing trap. Hands reaching to grab, feet aiming to pin, bodies meant to smother his movement rather than trade blows. From a different angle entirely, another kunai flew, and this time Kakashi caught a glimpse of pink hair in the distance. Sakura's finally moving, Naruto thought, almost surprised. Now, Naruto snapped. Sasuke hit him. Sasuke didn't hesitate. His hands blurred through seals, chakra flaring hot. Fire style. A massive fireball roared out, twice the size of the earlier one, hot enough to turn the trees to ash. For a split second, it felt like the world held its breath, like they'd actually. The fireball smashed through Naruto's clones in a violent bloom of heat and smoke. And where Kakashi should have been, there was a log, charred, disintegrating, and steaming. Naruto's teeth clenched. Damn it, another substitution. Of course, Naruto whirled to Sasuke, voice fast. You've got the biggest firepower. Sakura and I pin him, you finish it. Don't waste your chakra unless we lock him down. Sasuke's jaw tightened, and he nodded. Not because he liked taking orders, because he'd seen it too. Now, the gap between them and Kakashi wasn't a gap. It was a cliff. At least Naruto recognized Sasuke was stronger. That was enough for now. They needed each other. Before Naruto could relocate Kakashi's position, a shadow flickered, and Kakashi appeared with Sakura in his grip, one arm hooked around her like she was a sack. Sakura's eyes were wide. Then her body went limp as Kakashi tightened pressure just enough to cut off movement. Naruto's eyes widened. Caught already? But how? She'd definitely been on the move constantly. Sasuke's expression hardened, but Naruto didn't freeze. He'd kept 2 clones back on purpose. Insurance. A hidden blade. Those clones moved immediately, sprinting through the underbrush. One formed the seal again, splitting into 2 more, 4 Narutos now, closing from behind. The first 2 clones struck Kakashi's blind side, kunai flashing. At the same time Sasuke attacked without being prompted. He threw 2 shuriken with wire attached, aiming not for Kakashi's throat, but for his hands. If he couldn't pin him, he could force him to let Sakura go. Kakashi noticed all of it. Of course he did. He was a jounin and far stronger than the 3 of them. He flicked a single kunai, and with a clean redirect he snapped the wire line, sending the shuriken off course so they tore through 2 clones at once. Poof. Smoke bursting as they vanished. But Kakashi's attention shifted for that half second, and Naruto was already using it. The real Naruto and 2 remaining clones surged in from different angles, triangular formation, closing space like a net tightening. One threw shuriken to force Kakashi's guard high. The other 2 came in low with kunai, targeting the bell side hip and the strap itself. Kakashi blocked all 3 streams like it was routine: wrist, forearm, palm, each motion economical. Then Sasuke's hands moved again. Shadow Shuriken Jutsu. The shuriken multiplied mid-flight, turning 2 into a swarm of metal. The air filled with spinning edges. Kakashi's visible eye narrowed for the first time. He shifted Sakura upward, tossing her into the air like she weighed nothing, so he could free both hands, and his fingers blurred through seals at a speed that made Naruto's eyes sting. A fireball exploded out of Kakashi's mouth, precise, controlled, aimed not at them, but at the shuriken cloud. Flame ate metal. The swarm scattered like ash. Kakashi's body flowed up and forward to catch Sakura, but Naruto was already there. Not on the ground, but the air, right where Kakashi expected empty space. She'd been in a Jinjutsu. Light, simple, timed. Naruto released it midair, letting Sakura drop at the last moment, forcing Kakashi's timing off by a fraction. Sakura's eyes snapped open as she realized she was falling. Really falling. and she screamed. The scream wasn't part of the plan, but it worked anyway. Kakashi's head tilted instinctively, attention flicking to the falling genin. That was all Naruto needed. Two kunai came in low, fast, straight. Kakashi twisted, reaching to catch them. His fingers closed around the handles, and the kunai turned into smoke. Two Narutos exploded out of the transformation. One slammed into Kakashi's side, vicious and physical, a full-body tackle meant to lock his hips. The other went straight for the bells. Time slowed. Naruto's fingertips brushed the cold metal. He hooked his fingers, almost, but not enough. Kakashi's leg snapped out like a whip, catching Naruto in the ribs and launching him away. At the same time, Kakashi's kunai flashed, clean, precise, cutting through the remaining clone, dispersing it into smoke. Naruto hit the ground hard, rolled, forced air back into his lungs. Before he could rise, Kakashi's hands flew through hand seals again, and lightning erupted from every pore of his body. Not the roaring, murderous kind Naruto had heard stories about, controlled, measured. A stream of crackling chakra struck the ground between them and spiderwebbed outward, catching all three genin in a sharp electric bite. Naruto's body locked, his muscles seized, his teeth clacked. Sasuke and Sakura dropped too, stunned and shaking as the current pinned them long enough to make the lesson clear. Then it stopped. The forest went quiet except for their ragged breathing. A timer beeped somewhere, thin, almost polite. Kakashi looked down at them. Time's up. His presence shifted, pressure rolling out like cold water. Sakura looked like she might vomit. Sasuke's fists trembled, angry and helpless. Naruto, despite the ache, felt something else. Not victory, but silent belief that his theory was right. They'd forced Kakashi to stop reading. Forced him to move. Forced him to respond to them instead of the other way around. That mattered. Kakashi stared at them for a long moment, unreadable behind the mask. Then, as casually as if they'd been on a peaceful walk, his eye curved upward. You pass. Sakura blinked. What? Kakashi's voice was calm. The condition was never about the bells. You wouldn't have taken them even if you tried for a month. His gaze sharpened slightly. It was about teamwork. Naruto exhaled, the tension in his chest loosening like a knot cut clean. Kakashi continued, voice quiet but heavy. This is an important lesson. Those who abandon the rules are scum. That's generally correct. He paused. But those who abandon their comrades. His eye hardened, and for the first time his voice felt older than his face. What was visible at least, are worse than scum. The words settled into the air like something final, and Naruto, still buzzing with leftover lightning, nodded once because for the first time he understood the rule behind the rule. Naruto pondered this in silence. Should he respond? It definitely wasn't the time for a joke. Kakashi seemed serious. On a lighter note, Kakashi said, and the words were so casual they almost felt insulting after the weight he'd just dropped on them. Your first mission starts tomorrow. You're dismissed. He turned and started walking away like he hadn't just rewired their entire understanding of what it meant to be a genin. Naruto let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The exercise was over. The pressure was gone. Sakura was still pale. Sasuke was still silent. But the suffocating edge had eased. Good, because Naruto had plans. After he got food, he was going straight back to training. The official grounds had lakes, and that meant water walking practice without having to balance on buckets like some kind of idiot. That night slipped by the way they always did. Fast, painful, productive. And it was subtle, but even over a single day, he could feel the difference. Tiny adjustments in balance, smoother breathing, cleaner transitions. The bell test helped even more than the training did. Not because it made him stronger, but because it made him smarter. Every small change would eventually compound into a huge change. After today, he'd finally seen how a Jonin moved, how Kakashi wasted nothing, how he read the battlefield even while pretending not to care, how he used their instincts against them like he was turning pages in a book he'd already finished. Naruto wasn't suddenly Jonin level. That would be ridiculous. No one improved like that. But he could be a much stronger genin than he had any right to be. And if he wanted to become Hokage someday, he couldn't afford to drift. He needed a foundation that didn't crack under pressure. Something he could build on until it became impossible to ignore him. Last night, he'd spent nearly 6 hours at the training grounds until his muscles felt like they were vibrating. Then he'd gone home and spent another 4 at his desk. Ink, scrolls, studying theory, fighting techniques, sealing basics, and now jutsu. He'd learned something useful, chakra paper. Apparently, if he wanted to figure out his natural elemental affinity, he needed a special kind of paper that reacted to chakra. Knowing your affinity didn't lock you into a single element. It just meant learning that element would come easier, faster, cleaner, efficient. Naruto liked efficient. He still wanted the whole set eventually. Every element, every tool, everything he could get his hands on. But that was future Naruto's problem. For now, he had to build from zero the smart way. By morning, he'd pulled his gear back on, tied his headband, and headed to the meeting point for their first official mission. When he arrived, the squad was already there. "Hey," Naruto said, glancing at the clock mounted near the street. He was on time. Actually on time. He blinked, surprised. They're early, and even more surprising, Kakashi was there too. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Suspicious. "Who are you, and what did you do with our sensei?" Kakashi's visible eye curved, not bothering to answer Naruto's question. Unreadable, as always. "Let's get on with it." Sakura straightened like this was finally going to be something serious. Sasuke looked bored. He carried the same attitude everywhere. Somehow both indifference and seriousness. Contradictory maybe, but that's how it felt. Kakashi's voice was calm. "Our first mission is D rank, and in today's mission, we're catching a runaway cat." The world paused, then dropped. "Ain't," Naruto repeated, like his mouth didn't want to accept the syllable. A cat. Was this another one of Kakashi's terrible jokes? It didn't seem like it. Naruto had read about mission ranks. D ranks were supposed to be within the village, basic support work, practice for teamwork and procedure. He understood that. He'd even told himself not to expect something dramatic. But a cat? He wasn't sure what he'd been hoping for. Bandits? A rogue shinobi? An escort job? Something with a little danger in it. This definitely wasn't it. Naruto's shoulders slumped before he responded with a single crestfallen word. "Okay." Sakura looked like she'd been slapped. "That's our first mission?" Sasuke didn't say anything, but the way his eyes turned away screamed waste of time. Kakashi, unbothered, handed them small earpieces and microphones. "We'll communicate through these. Don't lose them." 10 minutes later, they were already hunting through a stretch of woodland near the village, weaving between trees and underbrush like predators chasing the world's most annoying prey. And Naruto had to admit, it was more time-consuming than he'd expected. Cats didn't fight fair. They didn't announce themselves. They didn't walk into traps like bandits. They just vanished. Kakashi's voice clicked in Naruto's ear. "Do you have eyes on target, Sasuke?" "I do," Sasuke replied flat. "Sakura, Naruto, surround the target," Kakashi ordered. Quietly, Naruto moved. Fast. The forest blurred into rhythm. Breath, foot placement, branches, shadows. He felt lighter than yesterday. Cleaner. Like his body was adapting to his new strength, even though there hadn't been much of a change since yesterday. But this is what progress feels like, he thought, almost satisfied. No matter how small, even if others couldn't see it, he noticed. His feet barely made noise as he slid around the perimeter. He found the spot Kakashi's directions implied, eyes scanning. There, movement. A flick of fur. The twitch of a tail. Naruto pressed the mic, confirmed. Target in sight. Point B. A second later, Sakura's voice came through too. Target in sight. Point C. They held. No talking. No rushing. Naruto watched the cat crouched on a branch like it owned the tree, eyes sharp and disrespectful. It looked smug. Kakashi's voice dropped. Attack on my signal. A few heartbeats passed. Now, they moved at once. Sasuke went in first, fast and direct, hands reaching, body controlled. The cat dodged like it had been trained by ANBU, slipping past his grasp by a whisker and launching off the branch. Sakura lunged next, trying to cut off its escape route, but she was a half step behind, hands closing on air. The cat twisted midair, aiming for a gap, but Naruto was already there. He leapt, body turning, arms snapping out. His fingers closed around fur. He grabbed the cat mid-flight. For one triumphant second, Naruto's grin started to bloom. Capture successful, Sasuke reported over the mic, voice monotone like it always was. Naruto looked down at the cat in his arms. The cat looked up at him. Then it decided violence was a personality trait. Claws shot out. Naruto felt a sharp, burning scrape across his cheek. And then the cat latched onto his face like it had declared war on his entire bloodline. Naruto made a sound that wasn't dignified. Gah! He stumbled backward, trying not to throw the cat on instinct, because technically he was supposed to bring it back alive and intact. The cat shredded at his skin anyway. Naruto slammed his mic button, voice echoing through all their earpieces. I hate stupid cats. Sakura's laugh burst through the channel before she could stop it. Something about seeing Naruto get scratched by a cat made her feel so good. She always felt like Naruto needed to be knocked a peg or two down. Sasuke made a disgusted noise. The two of them always found a way to irritate him. Kakashi ripped the earpiece out with 2 fingers, and held it away from his head like it might bite. Naruto's scream had been loud enough to qualify as a weapon. He flexed his jaw once, testing for hearing damage, then let his shoulders loosen as the adrenaline of first mission faded into something almost warm. They'd done it. Ridiculous as it was, Team 7 had completed their first assignment. For a moment, just a moment, Kakashi found himself slipping backward in time. A different team. A different day. A younger version of himself walking into the world thinking he understood what it meant to be a ninja. Sakura's voice, her sharpness, her insistence on being seen. It tugged at a memory he didn't like to touch. Rin had been softer, kinder, but there was something in Sakura's determination that brushed the same nerve. Sasuke's silence, the way he watched without showing anything, the way he moved like he didn't want anyone close enough to be a weakness. That was familiar in a way Kakashi hated. And Naruto was the worst. Not because of anything the kid did. Not because Naruto was annoying, or loud, or stubborn. Kakashi had already learned there was more under the surface than the village's rumors admitted. It was the shape of him, the stubborn hope, the reckless heart. The way he threw himself forward like dying wasn't a real possibility. It reminded Kakashi of Obito. Not the Obito from childhood stories. Not the goofy kid in the academy. The Obito from the end. The last moments. The day everything broke and the world never quite stopped bleeding after. It left a bitter taste in Kakashi's mouth. He stared at the tree line, eyes unfocused, and felt that old, familiar weight settle between his ribs. The weight of mistakes stacked on mistakes until it felt like a life sentence. He inhaled slowly, then let the breath out. That was his baggage, not theirs. And he wasn't going to make the mistake of letting it poison another team. He'd been given these 3 for a reason. Maybe by the Hokage. Maybe by fate. Maybe by the universe's twisted sense of humor. Either way, Kakashi was their teacher now, and he would not be the reason they failed. Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi's head tilted. Naruto stepped through the brush with the captured cat in hand, holding it away from his face like it was a bomb. There were fresh claw marks on his cheek, and the cat looked smug enough to be proud of them. Kakashi cleared his throat like he hadn't just been drowning in ghosts. Naruto. Good. Let's head back. Naruto hesitated. Wait. Could I ask a favor before the others arrive? Kakashi's visible eye flicked over him, measuring. Naruto wasn't asking like a kid begging for candy. He was careful, almost deliberate. That depends, Kakashi said. On what it is. Naruto held up his free hand. Chakra paper. Kakashi paused. Naruto continued quickly, as if he was afraid the chance would vanish. The kind that tells you your elemental affinity. I want to start elemental training as soon as possible. Kakashi didn't answer immediately. He didn't want to show surprise. Most genin didn't even know chakra paper existed. And even if they did, it was usually because their parents had told them. Parents who were ninja, parents who had money, parents who had time. Naruto had none of those, and yet he was standing there asking like it was the most normal thing in the world. Kakashi reached into his pouch and pulled out a small slip of pale paper, plain and unimpressive. He held it out. Do you know how to use it? Naruto nodded like he'd rehearsed the answer. Yeah, Kakashi watched him closely as Naruto took it, because if Naruto really could do this cleanly, it would say a lot about his control, about his discipline. Naruto placed the paper between thumb and index finger. His expression shifted, less loud, less animated, eyes narrowing slightly as he focused inward. Kakashi could almost see the path in Naruto's mind. Core to chest, chest to shoulder, shoulder down the arm. Chakra tightening into a thin stream through his fingertips. Naruto exhaled. The wind in the air clearing stirred. The paper split, cleanly, neatly, in half. Kakashi's visible eye sharpened. Wind. Naruto blinked at the torn paper like it had just surprised him too. Then a slow grin spread across his face, bright and real. Wind. He murmured, half to himself. That's actually kinda cool. Kakashi didn't comment on how rare it was in Konoha. Naruto would find that out soon enough. He just watched the grin and felt an uncomfortable flicker of deja vu tighten in his chest. Obito used to grin like that. Kakashi pushed the thought away before it dug in. Thank you, Kakashi-sensei, Naruto said, grin widening. Kakashi gave a small nod. Then, because he could be many things, but he wasn't cruel, he added, I'll drop by later with some wind chakra control exercises. Naruto's eyes widened like he'd been handed a legendary weapon. Really, Kakashi said, voice mild. Congratulations, Naruto. Naruto looked like he didn't know what to do with praise that wasn't sarcasm. Then Sakura and Sasuke arrived through the brush, Sakura already mid-complaint. Naruto. Why'd you run off like that? She swung a fist at him out of habit. Naruto shifted half a step, and her punch cut air. Sakura froze, annoyed that he dodged so easily, annoyed that her body hadn't caught up to her anger. Naruto didn't even smirk. He just held the cat a little farther away from his face. Kakashi cut in before it spiraled. Enough, mission's over. Report to the Hokage. They returned the cat. They filed the paperwork. They stood in the Hokage's office while Hiruzen nodded and smiled because he'd seen 1,000 new Genin teams stumble through the same start. And then, the days began to blur. A month passed, not dramatically. Not with some big montage where Naruto suddenly became unstoppable. It passed the way training always passed, with sore muscles, scraped hands, sweat, and incremental progress stacked so tightly it became hard to see until you looked back and realized the climb had happened. Team 7 got sharper. You'd think they were a different team to the one last month. They hadn't become friendly, at least not in the way Naruto had imagined teams being friendly, but functional. Their movements started to match. Their timing improved. Even their arguments started turning into strategy instead of noise. Kakashi took more interest. For the first time, Naruto saw their Jonin teacher actually teach instead of just test. Sasuke learned a lot from Kakashi, especially outside official team sessions. Kakashi made time for him, corrected his form, tightened his fundamentals, pushed him to stop relying on raw talent. Naruto joined sometimes, but he got the best results alone unless it was a survival-style exercise. He trained best when he could break things down his way. Repeat, refine, repeat again until it became instinct. Sakura improved too. More than Naruto expected, honestly. 2 or 3 extra training sessions a week did what they were supposed to do. More stamina, better weapon handling, sharper movement. Her theory knowledge finally started translating into action. But Naruto had the most growth. His no-sleep advantage didn't make him invincible. It made him ruthlessly consistent. It made him relentless. It gave him more chances to fail privately until failing stopped being scary and started being data. His throwing weapon skill jumped again. Cleaner draws. Each weapon landed exactly where he meant them to land. He learned the art of misdirection to a decent extent. His taijutsu improved under Kakashi's sessions, and then improved again at night, when Naruto drilled the same corrections 100 times until his body stopped arguing. His chakra control finally hit the level where water walking became reliable. Not 2 seconds and splash. Real steps. Real stability. The lake's surface under his feet like an agreement instead of a joke. He even managed basic healing ninjutsu. Minor wounds, small cuts, fatigue relief, minor poison removal. Nothing flashy, but enough to keep going. Wind training progressed too. He'd completed the first step, cutting a leaf cleanly with chakra alone. The second step was a different monster, a coin. The goal stayed the same, slice it cleanly. But if his control wavered, the coin didn't just resist, it shattered. Sharp fragments cut his fingers. If his power was too low, nothing happened. Too much, explosion. Too little, useless. Naruto's hands were nicked up more often than he liked, but he could feel it getting closer. Like the edge of a blade finally finding the right angle. And Fuinjutsu, that became his quiet obsession. He built a strong base, storage seals first, again and again, until he could seal hundreds of items into a scroll reliably. It wasn't glamorous, but it mattered. It meant longer missions without carrying half the world on his back. It meant options. Then he crafted something more dangerous. A movement seal, delicate, precise, the kind that demanded his full concentration. When he used it, he couldn't move. If his focus slipped, the seal failed, and he'd be in big trouble. But if used with teammates, it could be the difference between winning and losing. Naruto kept it hidden, an ace. Over the past week, he'd even started requesting D ranks on his own, which the Hokage reluctantly allowed Naruto to do. Small jobs that forced him to practice tracking, patience, traps. 28 in total. Most were easy, but Naruto made them harder by setting rules for himself. Only taijutsu, only stealth, only sealing. He treated every errand like a training exercise. Still, by the end of that month, Naruto felt the itch under his skin again. He'd had enough. Enough cats. Enough weeds. Enough help the villager carry boxes nonsense. He wanted something harder, something that actually mattered. So when Team 7 headed to the Hokage's office to submit another report, Naruto's mind was already working. He had a plan to get a C rank, and he was going to sell it like a mission depended on it. Enter. An old-sounding voice called from behind the door. Team 7 filed into the Hokage's office with the familiar rhythm of routine. Mission done. Report delivered. Leave. Repeat. Kakashi stepped forward like he owned the process and began without fuss. Team 7 has completed the D-rank mission assigned, he said, voice even. We located the cat Tora and returned it to its owner. Hiruzen Sarutobi listened with the patient calm of a man who'd heard 1,000 reports just like it. He nodded once. Good work. You are dismissed. Kakashi turned slightly, ready to herd them out, and Naruto opened his mouth. Lord Third, Naruto said, loud enough that even the ANBU in the shadows probably rolled their eyes. How much longer are you expecting us to do these missions? Kakashi's posture froze. Sakura's eyes widened in horror. Sasuke's brow twitched like he was trying to decide if Naruto was brave or just suicidal. Naruto kept going anyway. I mean, we're doing multiple D-ranks a day. We're working together fine. We're not falling apart. He jabbed a thumb toward Kakashi. Ask Kakashi-sensei. Then, because Naruto knew how the village thought, and because he wasn't above using it, he played the card he'd been saving. And we even have Sasuke on our team, Naruto added smoothly. He was the top scorer in the academy. Sasuke's eyes slid to Naruto, perplexed. He couldn't place him. Sometimes Naruto sounded sharp enough to cut stone. Other times he acted like a kid with a broken toy. Sasuke didn't disagree with the point. D-ranks were getting tiresome, but he also wasn't about to challenge the Hokage like this. Naruto finally let a grin spread across his face, bright and defiant. I refuse to do any more D-rank missions until we get a better one. The room went silent in a way that felt dangerous. Sakura lunged for him out of pure panic. Naruto, her fist swung toward the back of his head. Naruto raised a hand to block on instinct, and Kakashi caught Naruto's wrist midair with effortless control, stopping the block before it happened. Naruto blinked. He didn't bother defending anymore. Sakura's fist connected, harder than Naruto expected. He winced, rubbing the spot with exaggerated pain like it wasn't his fault. Then he tried to pull his arm free from Kakashi's grip, annoyance flaring. Hiruzen let out a long sigh, the sigh of a man whose entire job was to babysit disasters. Naruto, Hiruzen said, voice tired but not angry. You make some good points. Kakashi's visible eye curved slightly, as if even he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Hiruzen reached toward a stack of folders, flipped one open, and spoke like he was giving Naruto exactly what he wanted so the universe would stop screaming. I do have a C-rank mission. He held the file up. It's straightforward. An escort assignment. A bridge builder needs protection while traveling to the land of waves and while constructing a bridge. There may be bandits along the way. As trained shinobi, you should be able to handle that. Naruto's chest loosened. Kakashi's grip on Naruto's wrist softened. He looked mildly stunned that this had worked. Sakura and Sasuke both tried to pretend they weren't pleased. They failed, but quietly. Naruto, on the other hand, didn't even attempt subtlety. Yes, he spun, threw his arms up, and bounced once in place like a kid who'd just been handed fireworks. Finally, a real mission, outside the village. The door slid open before Hiruzen could say anything else. An older man stumbled in, cheeks flushed and breath sour with alcohol. He carried himself like someone who'd been tired for decades and decided bitterness was a personality. Naruto's celebration died mid-bounce. He straightened up fast, like he'd suddenly remembered this was the Hokage's office. Hiruzen gestured toward the man. This is Tazuna, the client you'll be escorting. Tazuna looked them over from head to toe. Then he scoffed. These brats are supposed to protect me, he said, disappointment dripping from every syllable. Naruto's eye twitched. He even caught something else in the man's posture, nerves hiding under the bluster. The way his fingers flexed at his side, like he didn't trust his own courage. Hiruzen's voice remained calm. They are competent, and Kakashi Hitaki will be escorting you as well. He is a jonin. That did it. Tazuna's shoulders loosened slightly, as if the word jonin was a shield. Naruto, however, felt irritation crawl up his spine. Who's he calling a brat? His hand drifted toward his kunai pouch, slow and deliberate. Not to stab, just to make a point. A tiny scare. A reminder. Kakashi's voice cut in instantly, sharp enough to pin Naruto in place. Naruto, do not threaten the client. Naruto clicked his tongue and let his hand fall away like he'd never meant it. Tazuna waved a hand dismissively, like Kakashi was talking to the wind. Naruto's irritation deepened. Miserable old man. Sasuke looked equally unimpressed. Sakura's lips pressed into a thin line. Kakashi continued, professional again. Be ready. We meet at the front gates in 2 hours. Tazuna, make sure you're prepared to depart by then. Tazuna grunted and stumbled back out, still muttering under his breath like being escorted was an insult to his pride. 2 hours later, Naruto arrived at the village gates, prepared, not just with kunai and shuriken, but with options. He'd packed a few sealing scrolls, supplies, spare gear, basic necessities. A couple of blank scrolls, too, in case they needed to carry something large or unexpected. If nothing else, it was good practice. He touched the edge of the scroll case at his hip, reassuring himself it was there. Then he looked up. Kakashi was already waiting. Naruto blinked, caught off guard. He'd half expected to wait 3 hours out of spite, because with Kakashi, it always felt like a coin flip between late and doesn't exist. Kakashi glanced at him, eye curving faintly. "You're early," Naruto snorted. "I'm always early. It's you that's the problem." Kakashi didn't argue. Sakura and Sasuke arrived soon after, both of them carrying what looked like marginally too much luggage for a simple escort. Sakura had a bulging backpack and a second bag slung over one shoulder like she was moving house. Sasuke, at least, kept his load compact, but even he had more than Naruto expected. Extra wire, extra pouches, an extra bundle wrapped tight against his hip. Tazuna was worse. The old man showed up with a heavy pack, a long bundle wrapped in cloth, and a stubborn expression that dared anyone to tell him he was being unreasonable. Naruto stared at the pile, then at the road ahead, then back at the pile. "We're going to drag that the whole way?" "All right, Kakashi-sensei," Sakura asked, already sounding like she wanted this mission to begin before she regretted it. "When are we leaving?" Before Kakashi could answer, Naruto stepped forward. "Before that," he said, "I've got something for the squad." He reached into his bag and pulled out several scrolls, simple-looking things, not fancy, not ornate. The paper was a little rougher than store-bought, and the ink had that slightly hand-drawn look, but the seals were clean. Naruto handed one to Sakura, one to Sasuke, one to Kakashi. Then, after half a beat of consideration, he handed one to Tazuna too. Begrudgingly, "These are item-sealing scrolls," Naruto said. "They'll let us travel a lot lighter." Sakura blinked down at the scroll in her hands like it might explode. Sasuke's eyes narrowed as he took his. He didn't ask the obvious question out loud, but his face practically did it for him. "Where did you get these?" "Those aren't cheap." Naruto caught it and answered anyway, almost casually. "I made them. They're not as good as the ones you buy, but they're good enough for carrying stuff." Sasuke stared at him a second longer. He didn't like it. Not one bit. Not because seals were useless. He wasn't stupid, but because Naruto knowing something Sasuke didn't felt like a personal offense to Sasuke's worldview. Still, Fuinjutsu wasn't Sasuke's path. It wasn't going to kill Itachi. It wasn't going to make him stronger faster in the ways he needed. So he swallowed the irritation, sealed his things, and tucked the scroll away. Sakura looked like she didn't believe it. No, that wasn't quite right. She looked like she wanted to believe Naruto was lying, because the alternative meant Naruto had quietly gotten competent at something advanced without anyone noticing. That didn't match the Naruto in her head. That didn't match the Naruto in anyone's head, really. Still, she didn't argue. Even if he'd bought them, it was considerate. Kakashi, meanwhile, took the scroll and turned it once between his fingers, studying the ink. His visible eye sharpened with interest. Sealing, he thought. That word carried weight in Konoha. The fourth Hokage had been dangerously skilled with it. And Naruto had no family to teach him. No one to hand him techniques. So how? Kakashi didn't ask. Not yet. He just filed it away. Within minutes, the too much luggage problem stopped being a problem. Sakura sealed her extra bags with a relieved breath, like she'd been saved from a long hike through hell. Sasuke sealed his supplies efficiently, movements neat and controlled. Tazuna watched suspiciously, then grudgingly allowed his load to be sealed as well, though he muttered something about ninja nonsense, like it was an insult. Naruto tried not to grin too hard, but he couldn't help it. A real mission. Outside the village, he'd been waiting for this for years. And finally, Team 7 set off toward the land of waves. The first 6 hours passed quietly. The road was open, wide enough that threats had nowhere to hide without being obvious. Trees lined the sides. Birds moved through branches. The sun warmed the dirt path in a lazy way that almost made it feel like a hike instead of work. Still, Kakashi stayed alert. Sasuke's gaze never stopped scanning. Sakura stuck close to Tazuna like she'd been assigned as his shadow, even if she looked annoyed about it. Naruto walked with his hands in his pockets, posture loose, casual enough to not waste energy, aware enough that nothing slipped past. Then they rounded a bend, and Naruto saw it. A puddle, a perfectly ordinary puddle, except it hadn't rained. The sky had been clear all day. The road was dry everywhere else. And this puddle sat there like it had been placed on purpose. Naruto's pace didn't change. He didn't stiffen. He didn't point and shout like old Naruto would have. He just spoke up lightly, voice almost bored. "Hey, Why is there a puddle here? Sasuke's attention snapped to it instantly. No hesitation. He flicked 2 kunai out, one at each puddle. The water exploded upward. 2 figures rose out of it like nightmares, peeling themselves off the ground, arms already moving, chains whipping between them like a living blade. The kunai clanged off metal. Not bandits. Shinobi. Kakashi's voice turned sharp. Sakura, protect Tazuna. Sakura reacted immediately, pulling Tazuna back and putting herself between him and the ambush point. Her stance was tense but correct, kunai out, eyes wide but focused. Naruto and Sasuke fanned out without needing to be told, circling the attackers to stop them from rushing straight through to the client. The 2 enemy ninja moved with a practiced rhythm, one swinging the chain to herd, the other closing in to finish. Their weapons weren't just chains, they were hooked, bladed, built to catch limbs and tear. Before Naruto could fully analyze, Sasuke moved. Cover me. Sasuke snapped and charged. Naruto didn't waste a thought. His hand flicked, and several shuriken flashed out, thrown not to kill but to force movement, to interrupt the Rouge ninja's approach and stop them from positioning the chain cleanly. The attackers reacted fast, twisting the chain to deflect. Sasuke slid in, low and sharp, aiming for the bells. No, not bells. Habit. Aiming for the opening. A clean strike. Something Kakashi had been drilling into the team. An opportunity he wouldn't miss. One of the 2 snapped the chain toward Sasuke's legs, trying to hook him and drag him into the other's blade. Sasuke jammed his kunai into the chain links, pinning it for a heartbeat. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Perfect. He followed with another burst of shuriken, targeting the brothers' arms and shoulders, forcing them to raise guards and lose control of the chain's tension. Sasuke used that moment to step inside their reach. Then Naruto made it worse. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Smoke burst. 10 clones appeared and surged forward, surrounding the 2 Chunin like wolves closing in on their prey. Hands grabbed. Feet kicked. Kunai flashed. It wasn't elegant. It was pressure, bodies and angles and chaos designed to stop the 2 from moving the way they wanted. Sasuke, fall back. Naruto called. Use that jutsu. Sasuke didn't ask which one. His hands were already forming seals, chakra swelling hot. Naruto retreated a step, letting his clones keep the 2 enemies boxed in. The clones got shredded fast. 2 popped into smoke, then another, because these weren't academy kids. They were trained killers out for blood. But the clones did their job. They bought seconds. Sasuke finished the seals. Fire style, fireball jutsu. A massive fireball roared out, filling the road with heat and light. It tore through the center of the melee and swallowed the Chunin and the clones in a blast of flame. Naruto exhaled hard, sweat prickling despite the cool air. For a second, he let himself believe it was over. Then, 2 dark shapes shot out of the smoke, fast as thrown knives. Not burned, not finished. Their chains snapped outward in a brutal arc, aimed to take Naruto's head clean off. Naruto's body moved before his mind finished swearing. He yanked a kunai free, ready to pin the chain again. But Kakashi was there. In an instant, Kakashi caught both enemies like they were nothing, arms locking, movement precise, power terrifyingly casual. A twist, a strike, a snap of pressure points. They dropped, unconscious. Silence hit the road like a weight. Naruto froze for half a second, staring. He didn't even look like he tried. Kakashi released them and turned to Team 7, voice calm, but carrying steel underneath. Well, Kakashi said, almost conversational. That was quite the surprise. Sakura swallowed. Sasuke's eyes stayed hard. Naruto's chest was still heaving. You did well. Kakashi continued. You reacted. You protected the client. You applied pressure. But, his gaze sharpened slightly. Those 2 were outside your skill range for now. He looked toward the unconscious attackers. They're rogue Chunin. The Demon Brothers. Naruto felt the words settle in his stomach like cold water. Chunin. That meant this wasn't a C rank with bandits. Kakashi's gaze shifted toward Tazuna. So, Kakashi said quietly, I believe our client has something to tell us. Tazuna's face had gone pale. The bluster was gone. His eyes flicked away like a guilty man caught under a lamp. Kakashi didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. This mission will be canceled, Kakashi said. It's at least a B rank. Possibly higher. Tazuna's eyes widened. No. Wait, he blurted, panic breaking through. I don't have enough money. The land of waves is poor. We can't afford stronger ninja. Naruto's jaw clenched. He could relate to that situation to some extent. He agreed with Tazuna, even though he knew it was irresponsible. Even though he knew it was the kind of situation that got Jinin killed. But something in Naruto refused to walk away. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the fact that he'd finally gotten what he wanted, and he couldn't stand the idea of going back to D ranks like nothing happened. Naruto stepped forward, voice sharp. "We should help," he said. "Isn't that what being a ninja is? Protecting people? How can you tell us to abandon him when that means abandoning someone who needs help?" Sasuke surprised Naruto by speaking up immediately. "I agree," Sasuke said, gaze fixed on Kakashi. "You told us abandoning comrades is worse than scum. This is the same thing." Sakura nodded quickly. "Sasuke's right. You said it yourself, Kakashi-sensei." Naruto turned a little towards Sakura, irritation flaring for a stupid reason. "Why does Sasuke get the credit for agreeing with me?" He swallowed it down with a sigh. "Not worth it. Not now." Kakashi stared at them for a long moment. His eye didn't smile. If anything, he looked uneasy, not afraid, but cautious in a way that experience carved into people. Finally, he exhaled. "All right," Kakashi said. "But if the danger escalates again, we turn back." No arguments. Relief flashed through Naruto. Then Naruto lifted a finger. "Wait. Instead, if you can, we should inform the Hokage this turned into a B rank. Request reinforcements. That way we won't have to abandon the mission." Kakashi's gaze sharpened. Then he nodded. Sensible thinking, Naruto. He formed seals, summoning jutsu. Smoke puffed, and a small dog appeared wearing a leaf headband like it had earned the right. It looked grumpy. It looked exhausted. It also looked like it wanted to bite someone. "Pakin," Kakashi said, "report to the Hokage. Tell him the Land of Waves escort is at least B rank, possibly higher. Request reinforcements." Yeah, the dog grunted. "Got it, boss." Naruto nearly jumped out of his skin. "A talking dog?" he yelped. Sakura's fist whipped toward him instantly. "Shut up, Naruto." Naruto dodged out of habit, but he noticed her punch had real speed behind it now. It cut air with a sharp little whoosh. He blinked. "Okay, she's getting stronger. I really need to make sure she doesn't hit me in the future." Good, they needed that. Pakin vanished in a blur of motion, heading back to Konoha. Kakashi turned back to them. "Stay sharp. No mistakes from here on out." Team 7 resumed the road. Naruto's eyes swept the trees, the brush, the road ahead. This time, if something felt wrong, he wouldn't mention it. He'd act, because now he understood something clearly. Looking stupid didn't matter, but dying did. A rustle came from the bushes, small, quick, wrong. Naruto and Sasuke reacted in the same instant. Two kunai snapped out of their hands and vanished into the undergrowth with sharp thunks. A tiny yelp followed, too high-pitched to be human. Naruto was already moving. He rushed the brush with a kunai in his grip, body low, shoulders tense, ready to strike first and think later. He tore aside leaves and branches and stopped. A small white rabbit stared back at him with wide eyes, trembling hard enough that its ears shook. One of the kunai had pinned a tuft of fur to the dirt just beside it. The rabbit wasn't hurt, but it looked like it was about to die of fear. Naruto blinked, confusion cutting through the adrenaline. He lowered his weapon slightly and muttered, "That's strange. I really thought it was a person." Behind him, Kakashi stepped closer and set a hand on Naruto's shoulder, light but firm, an anchoring touch. Kakashi wasn't looking at the rabbit either. His visible eye had narrowed, and his posture had changed in a way Naruto recognized now. Stillness that wasn't relaxation, but readiness. Something had tripped Kakashi's instincts. For a heartbeat, Kakashi said nothing. Then his voice cracked across the road with sudden force. "Everyone down now." Kakashi dropped instantly. Naruto ducked hard, hitting the dirt with his forearms. Sasuke yanked Sakura and Tazuna down at the same time, pulling them so fast Sakura barely got her hands under her before she landed. Tazuna made an indignant noise that turned into a gasp when a shadow swept over them. A massive sword flew overhead with a whistle so sharp it made Naruto's skin prickle. The wind of it tugged at his hair. The sound of it felt like the edge passing a finger's width from his throat. If Kakashi hadn't shouted, if Kakashi hadn't sensed it early enough, Naruto wouldn't have had time to do anything but die. His stomach turned cold as he realized it. He hadn't even sensed the attack until it was already too late. It wasn't just a scare. It was a lesson carved into his nerves. His awareness still wasn't sharp enough. He'd trained his body, his control, his technique, but his senses, his instincts, not tuned to this level. Not yet. Kakashi looked up slowly. His expression hardened in a way that made Naruto's chest tighten, not because it was scary, but because it was familiar to Kakashi. Recognition, not surprise. The sword slammed into a tree trunk with a heavy crack, burying itself so deep the bark split outward. A man landed on the hilt like it was a platform, balancing with effortless confidence. He was tall, broad, wrapped in bandages around his neck and lower face. Only his eyes showed, flat, pale, and empty in a way Naruto didn't like. The air around him felt heavy, as if the world had decided to hold its breath. Kakashi's voice came out low, strained. Zabuza Momochi, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. Naruto didn't know the title, but Kakashi's tone told him everything he needed to know. This wasn't like the Demon Brothers. This wasn't even close. Zabuza's gaze slid to Kakashi, and even through the bandages Naruto could hear the grin in his voice. "The copy ninja Kakashi," he said. "How lucky." Naruto's instincts screamed at him to do something. Anything. Before that calm turned into motion. His fear didn't make him freeze. It made him aggressive. He snapped several shuriken from his pouch and hurled them at Zabuza in a tight spread. Then he forced chakra into the next step of an idea he'd barely tested. If he could clone himself, why not the weapons already in flight? Shadow Shuriken Jutsu. The shuriken multiplied midair, turning into a buzzing swarm. Metal screamed through the air toward Zabuza's position. Kakashi shouted, too late to stop him. "No, Naruto." The storm of shuriken tore apart the tree where Zabuza had been standing. Bark exploded, leaves shredded, wood splintered. For the smallest fraction of a second, Naruto felt a spark of hope. Then the hair on the back of his neck rose. Killing intent hit him like a physical force. Not fear, not threat. Something colder, an instinctive certainty that death was behind him. Naruto's body locked for a heartbeat, breath catching in his throat as if the air had turned to stone. He whipped around. A giant sword was already swinging toward his neck. Too close, too fast. The blade filled his vision. Naruto tried to move and found his muscles refusing for one terrifying instant. Clang. Metal screamed against metal. Kakashi was there. He stood between Naruto and the blade, arms shaking as he blocked Zabuza's massive sword with 2 kunai that looked ridiculous against it. The impact drove Kakashi's feet into the dirt, gouging lines as he was pushed back. Kakashi didn't fight the force head-on. He gave ground, controlled it, redirected it, then hooked an arm around Naruto and dragged him out of the kill zone in one smooth motion. They slid to a stop a safe distance away. Naruto's lungs finally remembered how to work. Kakashi didn't take his eye off Zabuza. "You 3, he said, voice steady but sharp. "This is not a fight for you." There was no room for argument in that tone. "I'm going all out." Naruto swallowed, heart hammering. Kakashi inhaled slowly, then exhaled, like he was cutting away hesitation. Then he reached up and lifted his headband. Naruto and Sakura spoke at nearly the same time. What is that?" Sakura choked. Naruto's voice came out just as stunned. "What is that?" Kakashi's left eye was red. Not a normal red, crimson, patterned, with 3 dark marks around the pupil. It felt like that I was looking through more than skin. Sasuke reacted differently. He didn't shout. He didn't move. He just stared as if reality had broken. "How?" He managed, voice thin. His breathing grew uneven, eyes shaking. And when he spoke again, the words sounded like they hurt. "The Sharingan." How does he have the Sharingan? Naruto knew that name. Hailing from Uchiha's bloodline. Their pride. Their weapon. So that was what it looked like. But Kakashi wasn't an Uchiha, so how did he? He also only has it in one eye. Zabuza rolled his shoulders, loose and ready, like a predator stretching before the kill. "Let's see what the famous Sharingan can do," he said, amused. For a heartbeat, the road went unnaturally quiet. Even the leaves seemed to pause. Then, the world exploded into motion. He moved so fast the mist itself lagged behind him, leaving a wake of pressure that raised the hairs on Naruto's arms. Kakashi met the first strike head-on, kunai snapping up at the last possible moment. Steel rang against steel, a deep, muffled clang that felt like a bell struck underwater. Zabuza didn't commit to the swing. The giant blade twisted mid-motion with brutal efficiency, turning what should have been a heavy, predictable slash into a tight, reoriented cut. Kakashi hopped back, sandals skimming over the thin film of water on the riverbank. Even that retreat wasn't panic. It was measured, economical, giving Zabuza nothing to read. Mist surged. Zabuza blurred again and reappeared low, below the sight line, sweeping the massive sword in a flat horizontal arc that would have taken legs clean off. Kakashi's leap looked lazy for half a heartbeat, until the blade passed beneath him and the displaced air tugged at his flak vest like a hand trying to yank him down. Kakashi landed lightly and slid, a controlled skid over wet rock, just in time to avoid a follow-up thrust aimed at where he would have landed. Naruto's eyes tracked it, barely. 1 second Zabuza was on Kakashi's left, the next he was driving him back toward the river with relentless pressure, not letting the pace settle for even an instant. Naruto's stomach tightened. This wasn't a normal fight. This was a fight between two predators who should have never met. Sasuke's posture had gone rigid, jaw tight and shoulders tense. Kunai held like it might shatter if his grip loosened. He wasn't speaking, but Naruto could read the thought in the way Sasuke's eyes kept flicking, measuring, memorizing, swallowing frustration. So this is what real strength looks like. Kakashi met the next charge with a flurry of deflections. It looked ridiculous, one small blade dancing against a weapon that could cleave a man in half, but the precision was terrifying. Kakashi wasn't trying to overpower. He was guiding the sword's momentum, redirecting it into less efficient angles, stealing power from a heavy weapon by refusing to meet it straight on. Zabuza noticed. He let the sword drop suddenly, the tip splashing into the river like it was nothing, and his hands snapped into seals, fast, practiced, rhythmic, like he'd done them so many times his muscles didn't need permission. Hiding in mist technique. The mist thickened instantly. It stopped being fog and became a wall. Naruto's vision collapsed into white-gray nothingness, and the sound of the river grew louder, closer, like someone had poured water directly into his ears. Shapes vanished. Distance vanished. Even direction started to feel unreliable. Kakashi's voice cut through immediately, sharp and controlled. Stay with the bridge builder. Don't break formation. Naruto shifted closer to Tazuna without thinking, shoulders squared, kunai up. Where is he? He hissed. But the question was useless. This mist swallowed sight and pride alike. Zabuza's voice drifted from everywhere and nowhere, amused and cold. You can hear me, can't you? That's all you need, right? Oh, so many ways I could kill you. Heart, kidney, brain, lungs, liver. To have so many options. A faint splash, almost delicate. A whisper of air moving past cloth. Naruto couldn't see anything, but he felt something circling them. Not like a person moving through fog, like a shark moving through dark water, patient and certain. Kakashi's Sharingan tracked subtle shifts, ripples in the thin water film on stone, minute pressure changes in the mist, the tiny disturbances that betrayed weight and intention. Then the killing intent hit. It wasn't dramatic. It was biological. Naruto's body reacted like prey. Muscles nearly locked. Breath caught. For a split second, his mind screamed run so loudly it drowned out everything else. Sasuke's knuckles went pale around his kunai. Tazuna made a choking sound. Sakura's breath turned sharp and shallow. Kakashi exhaled, steady, like he'd been expecting this. What else would he expect from one of the seven swordsmen? Zabuza struck. The massive blade carved into the mist with a wet roar. Kakashi pivoted and caught it again, but the force drove him backward, boots gouging grooves into the slick ground. Zabuza didn't stop at one swing. He chained the momentum into a downward chop. Kakashi ducked, barely, and the blade buried into rock behind him with a crack that sent stone chips flying. Naruto flinched as a chunk whizzed past his cheek. He'd barely reacted to the debris, let alone the sword. It made his skin crawl. How little time there was between safe and dead. Kakashi's kunai flashed upward toward Zabuza's throat, and Zabuza let go of the sword. Naruto's eyes widened. Who drops their weapon in the middle of a fight? But Zabuza's hands were already forming seals again. Water around the embedded blade surged upward like it had been waiting for orders. Kakashi's Sharingan followed the hand signs, copied them in real time, and Kakashi's hands mirrored Zabuza's, faster than Naruto could blink. Water Dragon Jutsu. Both voices overlapped. Zabuza's and Kakashi's, two identical commands, one after the other, like an echo that had learned teeth. Two water dragons erupted from the river with violent grace, spiraling around each other like dueling serpents. They smashed together midair, water detonating outward in a shockwave that slapped Naruto and Sasuke with cold spray. For a moment, the mist wavered, thinned by force, and Naruto caught a snapshot of the battlefield. Kakashi and Zabuza, silhouettes against the river, eyes locked like neither of them had ever considered losing. Zabuza's voice was pleased. So you really can copy me perfectly. Kakashi's eyes narrowed. And you're not surprised. Zabuza's grin widened behind his bandages. I didn't come here to be impressed. I came here to kill that geezer behind you. He yanked the sword free with a grunt and swung it in a wide arc. Except it wasn't aimed at Kakashi. The blade became a spinning blur cutting through the mist toward Naruto and the others. Naruto's brain kicked hard into gear. He snapped his kunai up, but even as he prepared to meet it, a colder realization hit him. That sword wasn't being thrown to hit them. It was being thrown to mark them. The sword hit the ground in front of Team 7 with a thunderous thud, blade first, like a guillotine planted into the earth. Water splashed up like blood, and then Zabuza burst out of the mist behind it, using the sword like an anchor point, a landmark in a world with no landmarks. His hands reached straight past the Genin, straight for Tizuna. Sasuke intercepted first, kunai slashing for Zabuza's wrist. Naruto tried to circle, aiming high. One quick cut at the neck to force Zabuza to guard, to buy Kakashi time. Zabuza's hand flicked. Sasuke's kunai met a bandaged forearm and jolted sideways, redirected with brutal casualness. At the same time, a shape formed at Zabuza's shoulder, water gathering and hardening into a humanoid outline in a heartbeat. A water clone. It drove a knee into Naruto's ribs with vicious precision. Air blasted out of Naruto's lungs as he flew back a few meters. Kakashi arrived a heartbeat later. Naruto didn't even see him move, only the result. A flash of steel cutting across Zabuza's line of attack, forcing the Mist Nin's reach to bend away from Tizuna. Kakashi's presence hit the space, like a door slamming shut. The moment he stepped in, the battlefield re-centered around him. The pressure shifted. The air belonged to Kakashi now. Zabuza didn't retreat so much as flow backward, mist swallowing him again, as if the fog itself were a cloak he could slip into whenever he pleased. His voice drifted close, too close, like a threat whispered through cloth. Protecting Genin slows you down, Zabuza murmured. Those brats haven't killed anyone yet. They're too weak. Kakashi didn't answer. He didn't rise to it. His Sharingan rotated slightly, gaze scanning the thin water film on the stones, the ripples in the river, the tiny disturbances in the mist. He was reading the world the way Naruto read scrolls, looking for the part that didn't fit. A splash, faint but deliberate, a shift in pressure. Zabuza struck again, this time from a different angle, low and toward Kakashi's blind side, trying to catch him mid-turn. Kakashi pivoted on one foot and deflected the first sweep, then stepped in fast enough that Zabuza's timing was forced to change. Kakashi's elbow shot toward Zabuza's jaw, sharp, compact, aimed to break the rhythm rather than win cleanly. Zabuza leaned back, avoiding the elbow by inches. Kakashi followed instantly with a kick, snapping it toward Zabuza's ribs. Zabuza blocked with his forearm, but the impact still drove him sideways, boots scraping on wet rock. Naruto stared, surprised by how much of this fight was taijutsu. No dramatic jutsu, no grand speeches, just two killers trading angles and timing, each move meant to steal the next move. Zabuza's eyes narrowed. Clever. He exhaled, and the mist deepened again, swallowing edges, swallowing distance. His voice came softer, amused in a way that crawled under the skin. But you're still listening for me. Naruto's grip tightened on his kunai. He hated that Zabuza was right. In this fog, all they had was sound and instinct, and Zabuza seemed to own both. A faint creak of bandages, a barely there ripple. Kakashi's Sharingan snapped toward it, and his body adjusted, stance shifting, weight lowering, kunai angled up. Zabuza emerged at Kakashi's left, sword already swinging. Kakashi blocked, but the sheer momentum of the giant blade forced his guard down, pressing his frame. Zabuza used that fraction, his free hand shooting out like a striking snake. It didn't reach for Kakashi's throat. It reached down, toward the river. Zabuza's fingers dipped into the water film and pulled, and the water rose as if it had been hooked, wrapping around his wrist like a sleeve. It surged outward in a sudden cylindrical swell, thick and fast, taking shape with terrifying control. Kakashi's eye widened, just slightly. Naruto remembered Kakashi saying something once, casually, like it wasn't horrifying. Water could be shaped into restraints if the chakra control was refined enough. Zabuza's arm lunged toward Kakashi's torso, water swelling around it, already hardening into a rounded cage. Water prison. Kakashi leaped backward, trying to break the line before it could close. Zabuza stepped in at the same time, closing distance with that awful, efficient speed. The water cylinder expanded like a snapping jaw. Kakashi twisted mid-leap, trying to avoid the forming prison. His heel clipped a slick patch of rock, and his landing faltered by an inch. 1 inch. That was all it took at this level. The edge of the water surged forward and brushed Kakashi's torso. Naruto's stomach dropped. He's about to be caught. Kakashi's arms tensed, preparing to force his way out before it sealed completely. Naruto moved. He didn't think about how stupid it was, or how dangerous. He didn't think about whether he'd ever used this against someone on this level, or even at all. He just saw Kakashi being swallowed by water, and felt something ignite inside him like a match thrown into oil. It had to work. No, it would work. Naruto, don't, Sasuke started, but Naruto was already sprinting. Sasuke, Naruto shouted through clenched teeth. Cover me. This time. He didn't say please. He didn't have breath for it. Otherwise I'll die. He knew Sasuke's ego. He knew the way Sasuke bristled at being ordered around. So Naruto framed it like a challenge, like a shared duty, like Sasuke was the one enabling the win. It wasn't the time for pride, but pride was the language Sasuke understood. The mist dragged at Naruto's skin, cold and wet. His ribs screamed where the water clone had struck earlier, each inhale stabbing. He ran anyway, feet slipping on the slick rock until he forced them to grip. Zabuza's focus stayed locked on Kakashi. To him the genin were noise. Weak. Annoying. Once he sealed Kakashi, he could finish the rest whenever he wanted. Sasuke moved. For once, revenge vanished from his face. He became all calculation. He darted sideways and threw 3 shuriken, not at Zabuza, but passed him into the mist. The blades whistled through fog like unseen threats. Zabuza's attention flickered, instinctively tracking sound and angle, just for a fraction of a second. Sakura wasn't idle either. She snapped into action, sending out decoy clones of herself and Tizuna. Cheap illusions, but placed well. A flash of movement in the wrong spot. The suggestion of weapons where weapons weren't. A moment's doubt. That fraction, Sasuke's distraction, Sakura's false targets, was everything. Naruto reached into his pouch and pulled out a paper tag, slightly wrinkled, inked with lines that were too precise to be random. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't the kind of seal that could be activated casually. It was his, learned in secret, practiced until his fingers cramped, rewritten until the ink stopped trembling. Naruto ducked low, slid across wet stone, and came up behind Zabuza in a desperate lunge, timing it as tightly as he could. Zabuza felt him. Of course he did. His shoulders shifted, preparing to backhand Naruto into the river like he weighed nothing. Naruto slapped the tag onto the bandaged skin at the back of Zabuza's neck. Seal. The tag flared with a dull blue-white glow. The ink lines lit up like veins, chakra flooding through the pattern. Zabuza's body jerked. Not frozen. Zabuza was too strong for that. His chakra was too heavy, too violent. But he was caught, like a giant animal hitting a snare. His muscles locked for half a heartbeat, then strained against the seal, trembling. What? Zabuza snarled, surprise flashing hot. Naruto's teeth clenched. The moment the seal took hold, it demanded payment. His chakra surged into it like water into a cracked dam. His arms started shaking. His knees threatened to buckle. He couldn't move while maintaining it. His whole body became an anchor, every ounce of concentration chained to the seal's pattern because this technique was not perfected. It felt like trying to stop a sword with chopsticks. Kakashi-sensei now. Naruto rasped, voice strained. Kakashi didn't waste it. The instant Zabuza's timing faltered, Kakashi twisted his torso and slipped out of the forming water cylinder before it could fully close. Water snapped at him like teeth, but missed, splashing over his shoulder and collapsing in a messy surge. Zabuza tried to complete the prison anyway, forcing chakra through the technique with brute will. But Naruto's seal tugged at movement and chakra both, dragging Zabuza's hands fractionally offline. The water prison wavered, lost shape, then finally collapsed into a heavy splash that soaked the stones. Kakashi landed in a crouch, then surged forward. Kakashi reached Naruto in a blur, one hand catching the back of Naruto's jacket and yanking him out of Zabuza's immediate reach like he was pulling a child away from a cliff edge. The movement seal flickered and died the instant Naruto's palm lost contact. The glow bled out of the tag in a fading pulse, and whatever tension had been holding Zabuza's muscles snapped loose. Naruto stumbled, gasping. His arms felt like he'd been lifting boulders with his bare hands. His chakra pathways burned with that hollow ache that came from overextension, and for a second his legs didn't want to cooperate. Still, he forced his head up and threw the last piece of the plan into the air. Now Sasuke. Zabuza's head snapped toward them, eyes furious, voice vibrating with contempt. Brats. Sasuke stepped in without hesitation, hands already finishing the final seal. His stance was crisp, cleaner than it had been weeks ago, controlled in the way only repetition could carve into a body. Fire style, great fireball jutsu. The fireball roared out, bright orange against the gray-white mist, like an angry sun tearing through a drowned world. It slammed into Zabuza's side and shoulder, flames licking over bandages and sending a brief wave of heat that thinned the fog around him. Zabuza braced, chakra surging. Water snapped up from the river in a defensive sheet. Steam hissed violently where fire met water, the sound sharp enough to make Naruto's teeth grit. It didn't drop Zabuza. Nothing about this man looked easy to drop, but it forced him to shift his footing and break the rhythm he'd been building. When the steam cleared, singed bandages clung to reddened skin. Zabuza's expression was murderous, but the way he looked at Sasuke changed. Less child, more problem. Anachiha, Zabuza said, tasting the name like it mattered. So that's why. Sasuke didn't flinch. Naruto wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, still breathing hard. He tried to force a grin, tried to sound tougher than his ribs and arms felt. Yeah, and I'm an annoying brat. Zabuza cut in, flat as a blade. Naruto's eye twitched. Every instinct wanted to snap back, to bite, to prove he wasn't just noise, but the words died before they could escape. Not because he'd suddenly become polite, because this wasn't the time. If Sasuke needed to feel like the spear point right now, fine. Let him. Naruto could be the knife in the dark until the team didn't need the illusion anymore. It wouldn't stop Naruto from getting stronger. It wouldn't stop him from becoming what he planned to become. Kakashi stepped forward, and the battlefield snapped back into focus like a camera finding its subject. His Sharingan fixed on Zabuza, calm as a drawn blade. You almost had me, Kakashi admitted, and his honesty was so casual it was unsettling. But you made one mistake. Zabuza's laugh was short, rough. Kakashi continued, voice sharpening. You underestimated them. His hands came up. The air around him changed, chakra gathering, focused, tight. Naruto felt it like the static before lightning. Sasuke's gaze flicked to Kakashi's fingers involuntarily, watching the signs. Zabuza tightened his grip on the executioner's blade. Try to copy this. His hands blurred into seals. Kakashi mirrored them instantly, Sharingan tracking micro-movements, copying the rhythm in real time. Water Dragon Jutsu. Water Dragon Jutsu. Two torrents erupted, like the river itself had decided to stand up and strike. Water dragons surged forward, massive and violent, colliding with each other in an explosion of spray that slammed into the rocks and flooded outward. The shockwave forced Naruto and Sasuke to scramble back towards Sakura and Tizuna, boots slipping as water rushed past their ankles. Naruto caught himself beside Sakura, chest still heaving. He started to speak, half relief, half habit. Nice, Sakura, without your. Sakura's glare snapped him quiet instantly. It's not over, she hissed, voice tight with fear she was refusing to show any other way. Don't say things like that. Sasuke nodded once, jaw clenched, eyes locked forward. Naruto's stomach sank. He'd relaxed again, even for half a second. Idiot, right? Naruto muttered. Sorry. The mist whirled as water displaced air, visibility flickering in and out like a broken lantern. Through the spray, Kakashi and Zabuza met again, their silhouettes flashing, disappearing, reappearing. Zabuza swung the executioner's blade in a brutal diagonal cut, aiming to split Kakashi from shoulder to hip. Kakashi ducked under it and stepped inside the blade's reach, where a weapon that large became awkward. He slammed his shoulder into Zabuza's chest to disrupt balance and drove a fist into Zabuza's ribs. The hit landed with a solid, sharp impact that Naruto felt in his own bones. Zabuza grunted but didn't fold. He tried to bring the sword around one-handed anyway, brute force turning his torso like a battering ram. Kakashi caught the flat of the blade with both hands, not to stop it, but to redirect it upward, then snapped a knee into Zabuza's stomach. Zabuza's breath burst out in a harsh exhale, boots scraping as he staggered half a step. Kakashi didn't give him space. He moved with frightening economy. No wasted motion, every strike placed to steal momentum or punish structure. An elbow that clipped his collarbone. A palm strike to the chin that snapped Zabuza's head just enough to blur his sight. A low sweep at the ankle that forced Zabuza to hop instead of plant. Zabuza barely cleared the sweep and slammed the sword down like a hammer. The blade crashed into the shallow flood with a violent splash. Kakashi used the splash. He kicked off the water's surface, chakra control treating the thin flood like solid ground, and sidestepped faster than the eye wanted to accept. He appeared on Zabuza's flank, kunai flashing toward the shoulder joint. Zabuza twisted, taking the cut along the outer arm instead of letting it sink deep where it would cripple the joint. Blood streaked briefly before water washed it thin. He snarled and swung the sword in a backhand arc meant to decapitate. Kakashi ducked, rolled, came up behind Zabuza with his hands already forming seals. Lightning crackled. Naruto's eyes widened. What? Kakashi slammed his lightning-charged hand into the water at Zabuza's feet. The river lit up for an instant, blue-white electricity webbing across the surface. Water carried it fast. Zabuza's body seized, muscles locking as the shock climbed through him, his sword arm twitching, grip faltering. Kakashi didn't waste the opening. He stepped in, grabbed the executioner's blade's hilt with one hand, yanked hard to deny leverage, and drove his shoulder into Zabuza's chest again. The massive sword wrenched sideways. Zabuza was forced to release it or lose his footing completely. Kakashi released the sword immediately. He didn't want to wield it, just deny its use, then drove a clean punch into Zabuza's face. Zabuza's head snapped back, and he hit the ground on one knee, hands catching in the shallow flood. Kakashi followed with a brutal roundhouse kick. Naruto's breath caught. Kakashi was winning. Zabuza surged up with a ragged roar, snatching for the sword, forcing it back into his hands. He swung it in a furious wide arc meant to clear space and reset the fight. Kakashi slipped under it like smoke, stepped into Zabuza's space, and hammered a fast series of strikes into ribs and abdomen. Taijutsu like a drumbeat. Zabuza tried to answer with brute force, but every time he committed, Kakashi was already gone, already hitting from a new angle. The Sharingan, which had seemed almost useless at first against Zabuza's experience, now looked like it was tightening a net, reading, predicting, adjusting. Sasuke watched, jaw clenched. Naruto watched too, hands still trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline and the aftershock of pouring chakra into that seal. Zabuza staggered back, breathing heavier now. Bandages hung loose and scorched. The sword dragged slightly, its tip cutting a line through the water. Kakashi stood between Zabuza and the Jinnin, Sharingan steady. It's over. Zabuza's laugh came out ragged. Over? You haven't won yet, Kakashi of the Sharingan. The mist thickened again. Then the pressure in the air changed, subtle, but sharp enough that Kakashi's gaze flicked toward the tree line. Naruto felt it too. That prickling sensation of being watched. A thin whistle cut through the air. Kakashi's head snapped. Senbon needles flashed out of the mist like silver rain. They struck Zabuza's neck with precise brutality, 3 needles embedding in exact points. Zabuza froze mid-breath, eyes widening in shock and rage, and something confused. Then his body went limp. He collapsed face first into the shallow water with a heavy splash. Naruto's voice burst out before he could stop it. What the? A figure stepped onto a branch above the riverbank, moving as lightly as mist itself. A white mask covered their face, animal-like, emotionless. Kakashi's tone sharpened instantly. A hunter nin. The masked ninja dipped their head. Correct. I have been tracking Zabuza Momochi. Naruto stared at Zabuza's body. That person had just killed him like it was nothing. Naruto had known, logically, that shinobi killed. He'd read it in books, heard it in stories, but seeing a body drop like that, so clean, so final, hit differently. It put a cold knot in his stomach. One day I'll have to do that, he thought, and the idea frightened him in a way he didn't want to admit. He forced the thought down. Not now. Not while they were still in an unknown situation. It is my duty, the hunter nin continued, voice flat. The mist's secrets must not be allowed to leave the village. Zabuza's body will be disposed of. Kakashi's Sharingan never left the masked figure. Disposed of, he echoed, suspicion clear. You mean dismantled? There was the smallest pause, barely a twitch, barely a hesitation. Then the hunter nin hopped down, landing near Zabuza with quiet certainty. Yes, I will take him. Kakashi's shoulders rose with a slow inhale. Naruto expected him to attack, to stop them, to demand proof. But Kakashi swayed, just slightly, like a candle in a sudden draft. Naruto noticed it immediately. Kakashi's breathing was heavier now, barely but enough. The skin around his Sharingan looked strained, taut. The eye itself, still sharp, had that exhausted edge to it. Kakashi had fought a monster S-class ninja, copied advanced water techniques, used lightning through water, and kept them alive. Chakra wasn't infinite. The hunter nin knelt, slipping a hand under Zabuza's shoulder with professional ease. You have done well, Leaf Shinobi. This matter is concluded. I thank you for your assistance. Kakashi's voice came out controlled, but the edge had dulled. He nodded once. The masked ninja lifted Zabuza with surprising strength for such a slender frame, then vanished into the mist with a single bound. Gone so completely it felt like they'd never existed. For a moment, there was only water dripping from leaves and the river returning to its normal rhythm. Naruto blinked hard. Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi pulled his headband down, covering the Sharingan again. The red eye vanished. His visible eye half-lidded, and for the first time the calm cracked. "We're not done," he murmured, voice low. "That wasn't a real Hunter Nin." Sasuke's eyes narrowed. "You think they lied?" Kakashi gave the smallest nod. Naruto almost began to shout that they should have stopped them then, but suddenly Kakashi's knees buckled. Naruto lunged and caught him by the arm. Kakashi's weight dropped fast, heavy and dead like someone had switched him off mid-sentence. "Kakashi-sensei," Naruto hissed, panic flaring. "Hey, stay up." But Kakashi was gone, limp in Naruto's grip. Naruto's mind snapped into motion. "We need to get to the Wave Village. Now? Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can look after him." Sakura swallowed hard and nodded. Sasuke's gaze stayed on the mist, cold and watchful, but he didn't argue. Tazuna looked shaken, guilt and fear mixing on his face. They moved, fast, tight formation. No talking unless necessary. And this time, Naruto didn't relax. Not for a second. Until the roofs of Tazuna's home finally appeared through the thinning fog and the last of the river's cold sound faded behind them. When they entered the house, bigger than Naruto expected, old wood and salt air, and the faint smell of fish clinging to everything. Tazuna's voice carried down the hallway before anyone even fully closed the door. "I'm back," he called, rough and too loud. "And we have guests. Prepare a bed. One of them's not in a good state." Footsteps hurried. A young woman, around Kakashi's age, dark hair pulled back, eyes widening as soon as she saw the load Naruto and Sasuke were carrying, appeared from one of the rooms. For a heartbeat, she stared at Kakashi's limp body like her brain refused to accept it. "Oh my," she breathed, then snapped into motion. "Follow me." Quickly, she led them down a hallway and into an empty room that smelled clean compared to the rest of the house. Naruto and Sasuke eased Kakashi onto the bed as carefully as they could, though Kakashi's weight still felt wrong, heavy in the dead way unconscious people were. The woman pulled the blankets up with brisk efficiency and immediately checked his breathing like she'd done it before. Sakura lingered in the doorway, hands hovering uselessly at her sides, eyes darting between Kakashi's face and the hall as if expecting another masked shinobi to walk out of the walls. Naruto felt the same dread sitting in his gut. Kakashi unconscious. Zabuza likely alive. A Hunter Nin, who was almost certainly a teammate. Nothing about this felt finished. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The silence pressed in, filled only by the distant sound of waves and the soft, steady rhythm of Kakashi's breath. Then Sasuke broke it. "I'm going to train," he said tersely, like saying it out loud was the only way he could keep himself from boiling over. He turned and left without waiting for a response. Sakura hesitated a fraction of a second, torn between fear and obsession, then hurried after him, because of course she did. Naruto stayed. It wasn't bravery. It was practicality, and maybe it was the fact that Kakashi had been the one holding the line between them and death. Naruto didn't like how close the blade had come, didn't like how helpless it had made him feel. This was something he could do. He stepped closer to the bed and stared down at Kakashi's face. The man looked strangely human like this, mask and all, tired lines at the corner of his eye, skin around the left side tense where the Sharingan had been forced open too long. Perfect. If Naruto was going to practice medical ninjutsu on a real person, better it be someone tough enough to survive his learning curve. Though he was confident enough it wouldn't harm his teacher. He raised his hands above Kakashi's head and let his breathing slow. He pictured chakra not as a flood, because that always ruined delicate work, but as a thin, steady stream he could guide with intention. His palms warmed. A soft green glow gathered there, faint at first, then steadier as he found the rhythm. Naruto wasn't a real medic. He knew that. He didn't have the control of a true medical ninja. He didn't have a teacher correcting every mistake. All he had was stubbornness, a handful of texts, and nights of practicing on tiny cuts and bruises, even dead fish, until his hands cramped. So he started where he understood the problem. Strain. The Sharingan wasn't just an eye. It was a chakra-heavy dojutsu. It demanded constant output to maintain. Kakashi had pushed it hard, copied techniques, processed information faster than most people could think, kept the eye open while fighting a monster in the mist. Naruto guided his chakra toward the tissues around Kakashi's left eye first, trying to ease the tension and reduce the stress, like cooling overheated metal before it warped. Then he moved to the smaller injuries. Bruises, muscle strain, the kind of damage that added up and stole reaction speed when you needed it most. He couldn't fix exhaustion. He couldn't patch whatever Zabuza's killing intent had done to Kakashi's nervous system. He couldn't heal the mind side of it, although he doubted Kakashi was that affected, but he could lessen the physical load. Minutes bled into hours. Naruto didn't break concentration once. His shoulders started to ache. His wrists trembled. Sweat gathered at his hairline and cooled on his skin. The green glow flickered occasionally when his control slipped, and every time it did, Naruto forced it back into a steady pulse, teeth clenched. He could feel his reserves, deep and monstrous, still there. But medical work wasn't about the amount. It was about shape and control. And shaping chakra, this precisely was like threading a needle in the dark. Finally, a sound, a rough grunt. Naruto's hands froze. He cut the chakra flow immediately before he overdid it and let out a haggard breath that felt like it came from his bones. Kakashi's visible eye blinked open slowly, unfocused at first, then sharpening. He stared at the ceiling like he was counting where he was. Then his gaze shifted. Naruto was right there. The last of the green glow faded from Naruto's palms. Naruto. Kakashi rasped, voice thick. Naruto's chest loosened so fast he thought he was pass out. Kakashi-sensei. You're okay. Kakashi inhaled carefully, like he was taking inventory of his body. I'm better. His eye curved slightly, the closest thing he had to a smile. Then his gaze dropped to Naruto's hands. Was that medical ninjutsu? Naruto scratched the back of his head, suddenly self-conscious. Yeah, kind of. I taught myself. I'm not great at it yet. He hesitated, then admitted. It's been almost 4 hours. Kakashi stared for a second, not at Naruto, but at the implication. For hours of sustained, controlled output without collapsing, without frying his own chakra pathways. Then Kakashi sat up slowly and ruffled Naruto's hair, gentle, grateful. Naruto immediately slapped his hands up to fix it. Hey, don't do that. I'm not some little kid. Kakashi let out a small chuckle. Right? A ninja. Naruto's annoyance softened into something quieter. He still hated how little he'd been able to do against Zabuza. Those seconds he'd bought with the seal felt tiny now. Sure, they saved Kakashi, but he probably wouldn't have needed saving if we could defend ourselves. Kakashi's tone shifted, professional again. Where are the other two? Naruto told him. Sasuke training. Sakura following. He also gave the location, because Naruto had been paying attention. Kakashi swung his legs off the bed, rose carefully, and steadied himself. There was a slight sway, but he forced it under control like it was a weakness he refused to acknowledge. All right, Kakashi said. We'll get them. Then we prepare. I'm not fully recovered, and you three need serious training. Naruto nodded hard. Zabuza wasn't the only problem anymore. There was a teammate out there, someone who had walked into their fight like it was a chore and walked out carrying a body like it was luggage. They headed out of the room, and a knock sounded at the front door. Naruto's hand was on a kunai before his brain finished processing the sound. It was too early for Sasuke and Sakura to be back. Tazuna and his daughter were already inside. If that knock belonged to an enemy, it meant they were being tested again. Naruto's pulse spiked. He made a decision instantly. Don't expose the real bodies first. He formed a hand sign. A shadow clone popped into existence and moved toward the door, kunai in hand, posture loose but ready to kill. Naruto and Kakashi positioned themselves in the hallway just out of sight. Ambush angles set, sightlines covered. Even weakened, Kakashi was still Kakashi. If someone stepped inside with hostile intent, they'd regret it. The clone opened the door slowly with its left hand, kunai poised in the right, ready to strike. Then the clone paused. Its shoulders eased. Familiar faces stood outside, leaf headbands catching the light. Naruto's clone lowered the kunai and signaled back with a subtle motion. Naruto's breath released in a quiet, shaky exhale. He stepped into view with Kakashi behind him. Hinata, Kiba, Shino, silent as ever, expression unreadable. And behind them stood a woman Naruto didn't recognize. Black hair, sharp red eyes, and a presence that felt like a drawn wire. Her red eyes weren't Sharingan red, but they were intense in a way that made Naruto straighten. Kakashi's voice confirmed it before Naruto could ask. Kurenai. His gaze flicked over the group. So you were sent as reinforcements. Relief hit Naruto so hard it almost made him dizzy. Pakken had made it back. The Hokage had listened, but then Naruto caught the looks on Team 8's faces. They were staring at him, not at Kakashi, at the clone that had opened the door like a solid person. Kiba's mouth was slightly open. Hinata blinked fast, cheeks faintly pink. Shino's gaze stayed steady, but Naruto could tell even he was calculating. That wasn't a genin clone. It was a shadow clone, a real physical clone. That was a technique above what most of them were comfortable with. Naruto waved awkwardly like it wasn't a big deal. Hey. Long time no see. Then he glanced at Kakashi. Kakashi-sensei'll debrief you. I'm gonna go get Sasuke and Sakura. He didn't wait for questions. He bolted. It only took him a few minutes to find them. Sasuke in the middle of aggressive drills, Sakura hovering nearby, trying to match his pace. Naruto cut in, short and sharp. Reinforcements arrived. Let's go back now. They returned to the house together. Quick greetings followed. Awkward, polite, tense. There wasn't time to catch up, not with the mission hanging over their heads like a blade. Kakashi's debrief was concise and grim. Zabuza Momochi, he said, is alive. The hunter Nin was almost certainly his ally. That means we're dealing with at least an A-rank threat now, possibly higher, depending on who that masked shinobi is. Kurenai listened without interrupting, eyes focused. Kakashi continued, voice steady but honest. I'll be functional in about 4 days, fully recovered in a week. He glanced at Team 7. Until then, we will prepare. We will train. We don't get caught off guard twice. Kurenai looked at her team. You heard him. We're support on this mission. That means we don't create problems, and we don't waste time, right? Kiba and Hinata answered immediately. Understood. Shino added, quiet and flat, which somehow made it more serious. Naruto stared at Shino like he'd just witnessed a miracle. He talks. The world really was ending. Kakashi pushed himself to stand straighter, still a little shaky, but refusing to show it. We start special training right away. Naruto nodded. His hands were already itching. Then, a small child, no older than 6, burst into the room. Small, wiry, dark hair and a messy mop, eyes sharp with the kind of anger that didn't belong in someone that young. He skidded to a stop just inside the doorway, chest heaving like he'd sprinted the whole way just to deliver his hate on time. His gaze flicked over everyone in a fast, practiced sweep. Kurenai and her team, the unfamiliar leaf headbands, Kakashi looking pale, but standing anyway, and Team 7 gathered near the hall like a knot of tension. Then his eyes locked on Tazuna. You're back, the kid snapped. Not relief. Not happiness. Accusation. Like Tazuna coming home meant trouble had followed. Tazuna's face tightened, already tired. Inari didn't let him finish. And you brought ninja, he said, like the word tasted rotten. His eyes slid to Kakashi and narrowed. More of them. Tsunami, Tazuna's daughter, appeared behind him, one hand landing gently on his shoulder. It wasn't enough to calm him, but it kept him from charging forward. Inari, she said softly, warning in her tone the way parents tried to hide fear behind patience. Don't. But Inari shook her off like he couldn't stand being held back. Don't what? He shot back, voice rising. Tell the truth? They're ninja. They show up and people die. The room went still. Even Kiba, who normally didn't understand the meaning of quiet, shut his mouth. Kurenai's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened, assessing, measuring, choosing not to escalate. Kakashi simply watched, calm but strained, like he'd seen this exact kind of child before. Naruto felt something twist in his chest. Not anger, not the old reflex to bark back, just recognition. A kid who'd learned early that hoping was dangerous. Tazuna tried again, quieter this time. Inari, go to your room. Adults are talking. Inari's laugh was short and ugly. Adults. He pointed at Tazuna like he was accusing him in court. You lied again, didn't you? You said it was a simple job. You said it was fine. Tazuna's shoulders stiffened. His guilt was written all over him. Inari's eyes flashed. It's Gato, isn't it? It's always Gato. He's going to kill you, and then he'll kill us, and you'll be dead, and it'll be. His voice cracked, just slightly, and he hated himself for it. He clenched his fists until his knuckles went pale. And they won't do anything. He stabbed a finger toward the leaf shinobi like they were just props in a story he'd already seen end badly. They're here for money. That's what ninja do. When it gets scary, they run away. Sakura's brows pulled together, indignation rising in her face, but she hesitated. The kid wasn't insulting her. He was terrified, and fear made people cruel. Kiba didn't hesitate. Boy, you little. Kurenai's hand lifted a fraction, enough to stop him without touching him. Kakashi spoke first, voice even. We haven't run. Inari's eyes narrowed further. Not yet. Naruto watched the kid's posture. The tremor in his shoulders that didn't match the anger. The way his jaw set too tight, like if he unclenched it something worse would spill out. Naruto took a slow breath and stepped forward, not aggressively, not crowding the kid, just shifting into the conversation like he belonged there. Tsunami tensed immediately, protective instinct flaring, but Naruto kept his hands visible at his sides, calm. Inari's eyes snapped to him. What are you looking at? Naruto didn't flinch. You're angry. Inari blinked like he hadn't expected that response. No kidding. Naruto nodded once, accepting it. And you're scared. The room sharpened. Even the air felt like it tightened. Inari's face flushed. I'm not scared. Naruto didn't argue. He didn't push. He just said, okay, that simple answer. No challenge. No mocking. Threw Inari off balance more than any insult would have. Naruto glanced at Tazuna, then at Tsunami, then back at Inari. Something happened here. Something bad. Inari's lips trembled for a fraction of a second, and he immediately turned it into a sneer. Yeah, something bad happens every day. Naruto kept his voice level. Did someone you cared about die? Tsunami's face went tight, pain flickering behind her eyes. Tazuna's gaze dropped. Inari went very still, like a wire pulled too tight. Then he exploded. You don't get to talk about that, he shouted, voice cracking fully now. You don't know anything. You don't know. His breath hitched. Tears flashed in his eyes, hot and furious, and he wiped them away with the back of his hand like they were an insult. My dad tried to be brave. Inari spat. The word brave twisted into something bitter. He tried to fight back. He tried to protect people. He said it mattered. His voice shook. And Gato killed him, right in front of everyone. And nobody did anything. Nobody helped. Nobody. His words collapsed into a raw sound that wasn't quite a sob and wasn't quite a scream. Tsunami moved, hands reaching for him. But Inari jerked away again, trapped in his own anger. He was stupid, Inari said, quieter but sharper, like each word was a knife he'd learned to use. That's what happens when you believe in heroes. His eyes locked onto Naruto, hatred laced with desperation. So don't stand there acting like you're going to save anyone. You're not. You'll leave. Just like everyone else. Naruto didn't reply immediately. He felt the old instinct to flare up. I'll be Hokage. I'll show you. The loud promise he used to throw at the world like a brick. But he didn't do that anymore. He understood what Inari was really saying. Don't make me hope. It hurts when hope dies. Naruto crouched slightly, so he wasn't towering over him. Not a submissive posture. A respectful one. His blue eyes stayed steady. You're right, Naruto said. Inari froze. What? Naruto nodded again. You're right that a lot of people leave. You're right that some ninja only care about money. You're right that believing in someone and watching them fail. Naruto's voice tightened for half a heartbeat, then steadied. That can mess you up. Inari stared at him, confused now, anger stumbling because it didn't have the fight it expected. Naruto continued, still calm. But you're wrong about one thing. Inari's chin lifted defensively. Yeah? What? Naruto looked at him seriously. You think your dad was stupid. Tsunami's breath caught. Tazuna's hands clenched at his sides. Naruto's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I don't. Inari's eyes wavered. Naruto held them anyway. I think your dad was brave. And I think the people who watched and did nothing, they did what they had to do to survive. But that doesn't make your dad wrong. Inari swallowed hard. He died. Naruto nodded. Yeah, no sugarcoating. No comforting lie. He died. Naruto repeated, softer now. And that's why you don't want anyone else to try? Because if nobody tries, nobody gets killed for trying. Inari's throat bobbed. His fist shook. Naruto's gaze flicked to the doorway, to the rain-damp air outside, then back to Inari. But here's the problem with that. He paused, letting the words land. If nobody tries, then Gato wins forever. Silence. Kakashi watched Naruto closely, something unreadable in his eye. Kurenai didn't interrupt. Neither did her team. They understood the shape of this. A battlefield, just not the kind with Kunai. Inari's voice came out small, hate crumbling into hurt. You can't beat him. Naruto's mouth twitched, not a grin, not cocky. Just a quiet certainty. Maybe not today, he admitted. But we're not leaving. Inari stared at him, searching for the lie. Naruto didn't give him one. We already fought someone trying to kill your grandpa, Naruto said, gesturing slightly toward Tazuna. A really strong ninja. Stronger than us. We didn't die. We protected him. We're here right now. He pointed gently at Kakashi. Careful, because Kakashi was still recovering. Our sensei almost got killed doing that. He's exhausted. He's still standing. He looked back at Inari. That doesn't prove we'll win. But it proves we didn't run. Inari's eyes flicked to Kakashi, then away quickly, as if acknowledging that fact felt dangerous. Naruto let him have the moment. Then he added, quieter, I know what it's like to be left alone. Inari's head snapped back. You don't. Naruto didn't let it become a competition. He simply said, I do. And somehow that hit harder than a speech. Inari hesitated, breath uneven, anger losing structure because it didn't know where to go. Tsunami finally stepped in, voice gentle. Inari, please. Inari's lower lip trembled again. He looked like he hated everyone for seeing it. Then he turned sharply, shoulders hunched like armor, and snapped. Whatever. He shoved past his mother and stormed toward the hallway, but not before tossing one last line over his shoulder. Weakly cruel, like a shield. If you die, don't blame me. He disappeared down the hall. The room stayed quiet for a moment after he left, like everyone needed a second to remember how to breathe. Tazuna rubbed a hand down his face. Brat's got a mouth. Tsunami's expression was tight with sadness. He's been like this since Kaiza. The name landed heavy. Kakashi's tone stayed calm, but gentler now. That explains a lot. Naruto stood back up slowly, feeling the ache in his ribs again, feeling the weight of what was coming. He didn't feel angry at Inari. He felt motivated. Kurenai looked at Kakashi. So, we're staying. Kakashi nodded once. We're staying. But we don't do it blindly. His gaze shifted to both teams. We will start training now. We are also assuming Zabuza is recovering too, which means next time we meet will be on the bridge. Our final battle, I hope. The 6 genin were led out of the house before the sun fully set, guided through a narrow path that cut into the forest behind Tezuna's property. The air smelled damp and green, moss clinging to the trunks, and the constant distant hush of the sea made everything feel slightly unreal, as if the world had shifted from mission to survival overnight. They reached a clearing where the trees spaced out enough to give them room to move. The ground was soft with pine needles, and the trunks were thick and straight, perfect for what Kakashi had in mind. Kurenai stood off to one side with her arms folded, her team naturally drifting toward her. Kakashi faced the group, posture loose, but voice firm. All right, Kakashi began. We're starting with chakra control. Naruto felt a spark of interest flare immediately. Chakra control wasn't just basic. It was what made everything else sharper. Stronger jutsu with less waste, better stamina, better precision, fewer openings. The kind of foundation that decided who stayed alive when the fight stopped being fair. Kakashi walked up to a nearby tree, placed one sandal against the bark, and stepped upward like gravity had simply forgotten to apply to him. No hands, no strain. He climbed steadily, then without hesitation continued until he was upside down on a thick branch, one hand casually holding his book like he was lounging on a chair instead of hanging over a forest floor. You'll be training to replicate that, Kakashi said, voice carrying calmly. He hopped down with the same casualness and faced them again. Tree walking. If you can't control your chakra, you can't control anything. He tossed kunai into the ground in front of each genin. Focus your chakra in your feet. Maintain a constant stable flow of chakra and walk up the tree. Naruto picked one up and turned it over in his hand, already weighing the problem in his head. He could do this. He'd been doing it for a while now. The question was what he did with that fact. If he pretended he couldn't, he'd waste time. If he showed he could, he'd draw attention, and Sasuke would take it as a personal insult. He was still deciding when Kiba exploded forward with the confidence of someone who'd never been humbled by physics. I've got this. It's easy. Kiba barked, sprinting at the nearest tree. He slammed one foot against the bark, tried to step up, and blasted chakra into his foot like he was trying to nail himself to the trunk. The bark cracked. His foot punched through the outer layer, and Kiba face-planted into the tree with a very undignified thunk. Naruto had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing. It wasn't that he wanted to mock him. He'd done worse in his early nights. But the sheer confidence-to-impact ratio was almost impressive. Shino went next without comment. He approached the tree with that same unreadable calm, adjusted his stance, and stepped up. 1 step, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then his chakra output wavered a fraction and his feet slipped. But Shino twisted in mid-fall and landed lightly, knees bending to absorb the shock like he'd planned to fail gracefully. Hinata and Sakura moved after that. Sakura made it further than Naruto expected, 8 steps before she slipped. She landed hard, but she didn't complain. Naruto noticed her eyes narrow in irritation at herself, not at anyone else. She was taking this seriously. Hinata stepped up next, quiet as always. She placed a foot to the bark, her breath steady, and climbed. No stumbles, no cracking bark, no wasted motion. She moved up the trunk like she belonged there, reached a branch, continued past it, and then, without hesitation, walked upside down along the underside like it was the most natural thing in the world. Then she came back down the same way, controlled and smooth. For a second, the clearing was silent. Even Kiba looked stunned. Hinata returned to the ground, cheeks already pink from being watched. Kakashi tilted his head. You've done this before. Hinata nodded, gaze lowered. I learned it with my clan. That made sense. Hyuga training wasn't gentle. And it showed. Naruto took the opening as his cue. If he waited too long, it would look like he was hesitating, and that wasn't him anymore. He stepped forward, but before he moved, he glanced at Hinata and gave her a quick, sincere nod. That was amazing, Hinata. Hinata's blush deepened instantly. Naruto turned to the trunk and climbed. Up, down, then up again, just to show he wasn't fluking it. His movements were efficient, not as polished as Hinata's, but solid. When he landed, the eyes on him felt different. Sakura looked surprised. Kiba's mouth hung open. Shino's gaze sharpened like he was adding a new note to Naruto's mental file. Kakashi looked genuinely confused. Sasuke looked annoyed. Naruto didn't let the silence grow teeth. He shrugged like it was nothing special. Irika-sensei showed me a few weeks ago. Took a while, but I got it. It was half truth and half cover. Kakashi seemed to accept it. Sasuke's expression tightened like he'd been handed a challenge he couldn't ignore. Good. If Sasuke pushed harder to catch up, that benefited the team. Naruto didn't need to win this moment. Kakashi gestured toward the trees. Anyone who can't do it yet, keep practicing. Start by fixing your output. Too much chakra blasts you off, too little drops you. The goal is even flow. Kurenai stepped forward smoothly to oversee the practice. She didn't bark orders. She just watched, corrected foot placement, and pointed out mistakes before they became habits. Team 8 moved into the exercise with quiet focus. Kakashi motioned Naruto and Hinata to follow him. You two, come with me. They walked until the trees opened onto a small lake. The surface reflected gray sky and overhanging branches, still and deceptively peaceful. Kakashi faced them. Next exercise is, I know how to water walk already. Naruto cut in before he could stop himself. Kakashi's visible eye narrowed. Let me guess. Irika taught you that too. Naruto hesitated. Sasuke wasn't here. There was no reason to keep playing the same game. He lifted his chin, a grin tugging at his mouth. No, he said proudly. I taught myself. Took a while, but I figured it out. Pretty awesome, right? Kakashi sighed like Naruto had just asked for praise for tying his shoes. It's basic Naruto. Every competent genin learns it eventually. Then he glanced at Hinata. And if I had to guess, Hinata already can as well. Hinata went so red Naruto thought she might catch fire. Naruto turned toward her, half curious, half amused at how quickly she turned into a tomato. Yes, Hinata admitted, voice small, stuttering worse as she spoke. I can water walk too. Naruto felt a weird flicker of pride and disappointment at the same time. Pride because, okay, they were both ahead of the curve. Disappointment because part of him always wanted to believe he'd finally found something that made him uniquely special. Then he recalculated. No, maybe. Hinata is just good. And I'm also good. That was enough. He nodded to himself, satisfied with the conclusion. Kakashi's voice cut in immediately. What are you nodding at, Naruto? Naruto snapped back to reality. I was just thinking, Hinata and I haven't been genin long, so we must be pretty good to already know this stuff. He grinned wider, then angled the grin toward Hinata. Right. Hinata's brain short-circuited. She made a tiny sound, half squeak, half gasp, and promptly tipped over like her legs had decided they were done. Hinata. Naruto was moving before the word finished leaving his mouth. He was at her side instantly, palms glowing green as he tried to sense what was wrong and heal her. Nothing felt wrong. Nothing seemed to need healing. Her breathing was fine. Her pulse was fine. No injury. No chakra disruption. Naruto's green glow flickered uncertainly. What? Kakashi's voice was tired, but not unkind. Naruto. That's enough. She's fine. Naruto froze mid-technique. You just need to calm down around her. Kakashi added, flatly practical. She's shy? And you are. Well, even if you've improved drastically. Naruto's eyes widened as he slowly stepped back like he'd just realized he was holding a lit explosive tag. Hinata stirred a moment later, eyes fluttering open. The second she realized she was on the ground and Naruto was hovering over her, her face went even redder. Naruto opened his mouth, then stopped himself from speaking too loudly. Hinata. He took a breath and bowed his head slightly. Awkward, but genuine. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare you. Hinata's hands flew up instantly, panicked. And no, it's okay. You didn't. Kakashi, as always, made it worse in the most casual way possible. Just accept the apology, Hinata. He's quite the eccentric character. Hinata's voice went tiny. Okay. It's really okay, Naruto. Thank you for apologizing. Naruto lifted his head, relief washing across his face. He wasn't trying to be better just in fights. He wanted to be better everywhere. Kakashi clapped his hands once, bringing them back to the point. Alright, here's the real training. Naruto straightened immediately. Kakashi looked between them, tone blunt but purposeful. For the next week, you two are sparring partners. Naruto blinked. Wait, Kakashi continued over him. Naruto, you'll learn a lot from a Hyuga. Their taijutsu is precise. They punish openings you don't even realize you have, and they don't waste movement. Then he looked at Hinata. Hinata, Naruto has ridiculous stamina and recovers fast. Don't hold back. It'll help you handle opponents who are stronger or who can outlast you. Naruto's mouth opened again. Hold on. What will you be doing? He almost shouted, then remembered Hinata was still recovering and reeled it back in. What will you be doing, Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi's eye curved slightly. Watching, correcting, and making sure neither of you does anything stupid enough to get injured. Naruto narrowed his eyes, half suspicious, half fired up. So you're just gonna stand there and judge us? Kakashi's tone didn't change. Yes, Naruto stared at him for a beat, then exhaled through his nose like he was trying not to smile. Fine, he muttered. Naruto looked at Hinata, and this time his grin wasn't cocky. It was steady, almost reassuring. All right, he said, rolling his shoulders once like he was shaking off the last of the tension. Let's get started. Hinata nodded, swallowing hard. She stepped into stance with careful precision, feet placed like she'd done it 1,000 times. Her hands came up, open-palmed, ready, but her eyes stayed soft. No veins, no Byakugan flare. Not that Naruto knew what the Byakugan looked like, despite hearing of it. Kakashi leaned against a tree nearby, book closed for once. Watching, Naruto didn't waste time. He surged forward, fast and direct, testing the distance in the first step the way he'd trained himself to. His sandals skidded lightly on the damp ground as he cut in from Hinata's right, trying to see how she reacted to pressure. Hinata moved. She slid back half a step and turned her body, keeping her center protected, hands flowing into a gentle parry that guided Naruto's first strike away without meeting it head-on. Naruto adjusted immediately. He feinted high, shoulder twitch, weight shift, then dropped low, sweeping his leg across the ground. Hinata hopped over it, surprisingly light, but her counter was hesitant. Her palm came forward, hit, didn't follow through, then pulled back like she thought he was made of glass. Naruto circled, keeping his breath steady, probing with jabs and quick kicks. Not heavy, not meant to injure, just meant to force her to choose. Each time she defended well, and each time she refused to punish the opening even when Naruto would reveal one on purpose. Naruto's frustration grew quietly. Not loud, not explosive, the kind that sharpened his focus into something colder. He shifted gears. He rushed in, forced a clash, let Hinata redirect his wrist, then rolled with it instead of resisting, turning her movement into his. His body slipped past her shoulder, and before she could reset, Naruto pivoted behind her. The kunai was already in his hand, not pressed in, not cutting, just there, metal resting at her neck like a clear answer. Hinata froze. The clearing went silent except for their breathing. Naruto held the position for a heartbeat longer than necessary, chest rising fast, eyes narrowed, not at her throat, but at her posture. Then he pulled the kunai back and stepped away. Hinata turned slowly, gaze lowered, cheeks faintly pink, hands still up like she wasn't sure what she was allowed to do next. Naruto's voice came out tighter than he meant it to. Hinata. She looked up slightly. Naruto frowned. Do you think I'm weak? Hinata blinked. And no, then why are you fighting like I'm going to break if you touch me? Naruto snapped, and immediately regretted how sharp it sounded. He took a breath, forced the edge out of his voice, but the frustration was still there. Sorry, Hinata. It's just you could have hit me, and I mean really let me have it at least 3 times. Hinata's fingers curled. She looked like she wanted to shrink into the ground. She started, then stopped, throat working. I don't want to hurt you. Naruto stared at her like she'd spoken a foreign language. For a moment, he couldn't even process it. Kakashi's voice cut in, calm but firm, the way it always sounded right before things went off the rails. That's enough, Naruto. Naruto's head snapped toward him. Kakashi stepped closer, not threatening, just present. You're frustrated because the spar isn't real. I get it. His gaze shifted to Hinata. And you're holding back because you don't like hurting people. Hinata's face went red. She bowed her head slightly. I'm sorry, she whispered. It's hard. When I see an opening, I think about what happens if I hit too hard. If I hurt someone. And then my body stops. Naruto's frustration wavered, something else slipping in beneath it. Understanding, maybe. Or at least the beginning of it. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaled slowly. When he spoke again, his tone was calmer. Hinata, I'm not mad at you, he said, then corrected himself honestly. Okay, maybe I was mad for a second, but not because you're not strong. Hinata glanced up, uncertain. Naruto stepped back into the clearing space between them, palms open like he wasn't trying to dominate anything. This isn't about hurting people for fun, he said. I would never want to hurt anyone I am training with. I hate the idea of it. His jaw tightened. He remembered the body dropping in the water. How final it had been. How cold it felt in his stomach. But if we don't get strong, Naruto continued, voice steadier now, then we don't get to choose who gets hurt. Hinata's eyes widened slightly. Naruto looked at her, really looked. Out there, Zabuza didn't hesitate. That masked shinobi didn't hesitate. People like Gato don't hesitate either. His hand clenched into a fist without him noticing. If you freeze because you don't want to hurt someone, someone you care about gets hurt instead. His gaze flicked briefly, toward the direction of Tezuna's house, toward the hallway where Inari had stormed off. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do, Naruto said quietly, is end the fight before someone dies, someone you'll never be able to replace. Hinata swallowed, throat bobbing. Naruto's voice softened just a little, but the message stayed sharp. You don't have to become cruel. You don't have to enjoy it. You just have to be able to do it when it matters. Kakashi nodded once, slow approval. He's right in premise, he said, then looked at Hinata more gently. But here's the other side of it. Hinata's eyes shifted to him. Killing intent isn't required, Kakashi said. Hurting people isn't the goal. Control is. He tapped 2 fingers against his own forearm. If you're afraid of hitting too hard, then your job is to learn precision. The Hyuga style is built for it. Shut down Naruto's chakra network with the gentle fist. He'll recover from it. Naruto shuddered from that. Shut my chakra network down? Can someone even do that? He glanced toward Naruto. And Naruto, don't corner her emotionally. She's not your enemy. Naruto flinched slightly, then nodded. Yeah. Sorry, Hinata. I'm still working on not getting so emotional. Kakashi looked back at Hinata. If you hold back out of fear, you'll hesitate at the wrong moment. But if you train your accuracy, you can strike hard without striking wrong. Then if the time comes, you'll hit where you need to. Hinata breathed in carefully, like she was trying to convince her body it was allowed to move. Naruto stepped back into stance. This time he didn't grin. He simply offered her a nod. Again, he asked. Hinata's hands lifted. Her expression steadied, still gentle, but not shrinking anymore. Again, she said. This time she didn't stutter. Kakashi's visible eye narrowed a fraction in approval. Good. Hinata closed her eyes for half a second, then opened them, and the air around her changed. Veins rose around her temples. Her gaze sharpened into something focused and frighteningly clear. The Byakugan flared. Naruto felt it like being looked through rather than looked at. The hairs on the back of his neck raised as he tightened up his stance. Okay, he muttered. That's different. Hinata moved first this time. She didn't charge. She flowed in, feet gliding, hands poised. Naruto stepped forward to meet her, throwing a quick jab meant to test her reaction. Hinata slipped to the outside, her palm cutting in, not to block the punch, but to strike through an opening. Naruto twisted away on instinct, but her fingertips grazed his sleeve, and he felt a weird, sharp numbness bloom where she touched. His eyes widened. Is this the gentle fist? It's not like it hurts that much, but my arm does feel a bit strange. Is it like a poison? Naruto was confused at this. He wasn't sure what to call it other than a strange fighting style. He backed up half a step, recalibrating. No reckless rushing now. Naruto feinted left, then darted right, trying to get behind her again. Hinata didn't turn late. She turned early, because she could see him coming. Her palm snapped forward, and Naruto barely got his forearm up in time. The impact wasn't heavy, but the sensation was wrong. Like his arm forgot how to respond for a fraction of a second. Naruto grit his teeth and forced his chakra to flow faster into the limb, stabilizing. He didn't summon a swarm of clones. He could, easily, but flooding the field with copies would teach him the wrong lesson. It would turn the spar into chaos instead of refinement. And it would rob Hinata of real reads. So he kept it tight. 2 clones at most, and only if he needed them for a specific purpose. He created one, just one, shadow clone that split wide, forcing Hinata to adjust her angles. Hinata didn't panic. She pivoted, Byakugan tracking both bodies at once. And for a second Naruto saw what Hyuga precision really meant. She chose the real one without hesitation, her palm cutting toward his shoulder joint. Naruto blocked high and rolled low, barely escaping the strike by shifting his toro, but it cost him position. Hinata pressed, closing distance, hands moving in quick, clean arcs. Naruto tried to counter with a kick. Hinata stepped inside it, and tapped his thigh with her fingertips. His leg went weak for a heartbeat. Naruto's foot hit the ground harder than he intended, balance wobbling. Okay, Naruto hissed, adrenaline spiking. Now we're talking. He fought smarter. Less lunging. More angles. He kept his hands up, protected his vital points as best he could, and relied on footwork, darting in and out, making her reset repeatedly. Hinata stayed with him. Every time he thought he'd found an opening, she'd already seen it. Every time he tried to slip behind her, she turned like his shadow. Her strikes didn't look brutal, but Naruto could feel the danger. Each touch was a warning that his chakra network could be shut down piece by piece. Hours passed like that. Naruto was weakening slowly. He had no idea what was happening, but he had to figure it out or his stamina wouldn't save him. They broke only to drink water, to breathe, to shake out aching limbs. Then they went again. Naruto's body throbbed as his chakra started becoming even more unstable. His body had stopped responding the way he expected, and he had to adjust the way he utilized his chakra. Hinata's breathing became heavier, sweat darkening the collar of her jacket, but she didn't stop. She didn't retreat into shyness. She kept moving, kept striking, kept refining her control under pressure. Naruto learned fast, not techniques, not jutsu. He learned distance, timing, how to read micro shifts in shoulders and hips, how to bait a strike without offering his own vital points, how to keep calm when his body wanted to panic. He also began to realize what Hinata was doing. He'd seen it briefly explained in a book. Chakra points. They supported the flow of chakra in one's body and were so small it was impossible to target. Well, it seemed it wasn't because he was almost certain that's what Hinata was doing. Hinata learned too. She learned she could strike without cruelty, at least to some extent. Precision didn't mean weakness. She saw that holding back wasn't kindness if it got someone killed. She imagined if it was Naruto dying because of her, and she couldn't bear to think of it. By the time the sky began to dim toward evening, both of them were exhausted in a way that sat deep in the bones. Naruto's legs felt heavy. His hands were scratched from blocks and slips. Hinata's shoulders trembled faintly when she lowered her arms, the Byakugan finally fading as fatigue took over. Naruto bent over, hands on knees, breathing hard. Okay, he panted, voice raspy. You're insane. Hinata's lips twitched into the smallest smile, still shy even now. Thank you. Naruto straightened slowly, wiped sweat from his brow, and glanced toward Kakashi. Kakashi gave a small nod. That, he said, was real training. Naruto nodded back. Hinata swayed slightly, and Naruto instinctively stepped closer, not crowding, just ready in case she fell again. This time she didn't. She steadied herself, cheeks pink, but eyes clear. Naruto walked beside Hinata on the way back, the forest thinning as the lights of Tezuna's house began to show through the trees. The fight had left both of them exhausted, but it wasn't the messy kind of exhaustion Naruto used to associate with losing. This was different. It felt productive, like soreness that meant something. He glanced at Hinata, then gave a small smile. Hinata, he said, tone curious, still riding the edge of adrenaline. Were you hitting my chakra points? Is that what Kakashi meant when he said you could shut down my chakra network? Hinata blinked, surprise flashing across her face. Why you knew? Naruto raised a brow. So you were. Hinata hesitated only a moment before nodding. Yes. Then, a little straighter, more confident now that she was talking about something she actually understood. My clan developed the gentle fist for many reasons, but the main one is to strike chakra points. The Byakugan can see them. Naruto slowed a fraction as the information clicked into place. His eyes widened like he'd just been shown a new kind of weapon. Before responding, he noticed something else too. Hinata hadn't stuttered once. Not even a little. She'd explained it clearly, calmly, like she belonged in that moment. Naruto felt a weird spark of pride in his chest. It was an odd feeling, not quite something he knew what to do with. That's awesome, he said honestly, scratching the back of his head with a laugh. I still can't think of a counter other than not getting hit. Hinata's lips twitched, barely, but it was there. A small smile that didn't look forced. They kept talking as they walked, and Kakashi trailed behind them without interrupting, letting the conversation happen like it mattered. Naruto found himself realizing how wrong he'd been back at the academy. He'd thought Hinata was weird because she was quiet and avoided attention. But being quiet wasn't a weakness, nor was it a bad thing. She was kind, hardworking. She had a spine made of steel and the skill to match it. And Naruto had to admit something he hadn't expected. He liked being around her. The faint warmth crept onto his cheeks at the thought, But the night air and the dim light hit it well enough that he didn't panic about it. By the time they reached the house, the tension in Naruto's chest had eased, not gone. This mission was still dangerous, but eased. Later, when everyone else finally slept, Naruto slipped out again. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet exit into the forest like it was the most normal thing in the world. He didn't bring much. A few scrolls, a couple ceiling tags, basic gear. Nothing that would make someone raise an eyebrow if they saw him training early. He'd learned that on missions, you couldn't train like you were back home with unlimited space and no consequences. You had to adapt. He reached the same clearing where he'd sparred with Hinata, stretched thoroughly. Hips, ankles, shoulders, wrists. Then formed a hand sign and made a single shadow clone. No army of them. That wasn't the point tonight. 2 hours of physical training. 2 hours of theory. 2 hours of chakra control. Then more physical work until he either smelled breakfast or someone found him. He started with something he couldn't stop thinking about. Gentle fist. Not the secret clan technique side. He wasn't stupid, and he wasn't going to try stealing Hyuga methods. But the principles behind it were fair game. Hinata's accuracy wasn't random. Her reflexes weren't luck. Her control was so fine it felt like she was touching his insides through his skin. Naruto practiced the parts he could mimic. Precision footwork. Shorter movements. Tight parries. Redirecting instead of crashing. He practiced meeting strikes at angles that turned force away, then countering immediately. Not with power, but with timing. He tested small bursts of chakra at impact. Tiny controlled pops meant to amplify a strike without wasting energy. It wasn't gentle fist. It wasn't even close, but it was his. The more he tried it, the more questions grew in his mind. How did it cause internal damage? It couldn't just be the Byakugan. Hinata hadn't activated it during the first spar, and the strikes still felt wrong, like his body couldn't decide how to react. Naruto stopped mid-drill, breathing hard, staring at his own hands like they had betrayed him. He had theories. None were complete, and he couldn't just ask Hinata to explain her clan's secrets. That would be crossing a line he wasn't willing to cross. So he kept working the puzzle alone, trying to solve it by feel. He didn't notice the presence behind him until a voice spoke. "You're up early, Naruto." Naruto's head snapped around like a whip. His kunai was in his hand before he finished turning. Kurenai stood there in the shadow of the trees, calm as still water. No hostility. No alarm. Just observation. Naruto forced his shoulders to loosen and sheathed the kunai. "Kurenai-sensei," he said, trying to sound casual even though his heart was still hammering. "I was just getting extra training in. Am I needed for something?" "No," Kurenai replied. "I was out walking. I heard you and came to look." Her gaze flicked over the clearing. Footprints, scuffed ground, the single clone standing nearby, Naruto's controlled breathing. Then she added, almost idly, "You're a lot different than Kiba and Shino described you." Naruto's eyes twitched. What did they say? Loud. Annoying? Idiot? He swallowed the reflex to bite back. Hokage wouldn't be petty. Hokage wouldn't get defensive. "A lot can change," Naruto said instead, shrugging. "And I got top marks in the theory test at the end of the academy. So I'm not exactly useless." Kurenai didn't react immediately. She simply watched him for a long moment, eyes unreadable, like she was trying to see what was underneath the words. The silence stretched. Naruto shifted awkwardly. Then, a scream. It came from behind him. Naruto's body moved on instinct, spinning toward the sound, mind already racing. Hinata's voice. And then, impossibly, Zabuza's silhouette, blade raised. Naruto's stomach dropped into ice. Hinata was on the ground, bruised and bleeding, her hands trembling as she tried to stand. Zabuza loomed over her like a storm given human shape. Naruto lunged, but roots erupted from the ground and wrapped around his legs, thick as ropes, pinning him in place. He tried to rip free. The roots tightened. He could only watch. Zabuza swung. Naruto's chest went hollow. The scream tore out of his throat like it wasn't even his choice. No, the blade came down. Hinata's body was cleaved in half. Something inside Naruto snapped so violently he felt it like a physical tear. He roared, voice raw and animal, eyes burning. "I'll kill you. No matter what, I'll kill you." Then the world folded. The forest warped like paper in water. And suddenly Naruto was back in the clearing, staring at Kurenai. The air normal. The trees still, the lake quiet in the distance. Naruto's knees hit the ground before he even realized he'd fallen. He sucked in air like he'd been drowning. His hands shook. His mind spun with afterimages. Blood, steel, Hinata's face. What did you do to me?" Naruto rasped. Kurenai's voice was calm, almost clinical. You're quite susceptible to Jinjutsu. Naruto stared at her with too many emotions colliding. Anger, fear, relief, guilt. His chest still ached like the illusion had been real. Is this what Jinjutsu feels like? No wonder Shinobi feared it. It didn't attack the body. It attacked the part of you that decided whether to keep living. Naruto forced himself to stand. His legs felt weak, but he made them hold anyway. He bowed to Kurenai, deep, genuine, the kind of bow he would have laughed at a few years ago. Please, he said, voice rough, teach me how to break out of Jinjutsu. Kurenai's expression softened. A small smile touched her lips. If you're out here early every morning, she said, I'll help you until the others wake up. And yes, we can start today. Relief hit Naruto so hard, he almost sagged again. Thank you. Kurenai didn't waste time. She explained it simply. There were many ways to realize you were trapped. Impossible details, broken logic, emotional spikes that didn't match reality. The goal wasn't to panic. It was to notice. Then, once you noticed, you centered chakra in your core and disrupted the foreign flow by bursting your chakra outward, like a shockwave. Break the link. Break the control. There are higher-level methods, Kurenai said. But these require Jonin-level control and mental fortitude. For now, learn the basics until they're instinct. So that's what Naruto did. Over the next few days, Kurenai put him in illusion after illusion. Some mild, some horrifying, some designed purely to trick his senses, and others designed to crush his emotions. It was brutal training, but it worked. Naruto learned to breathe through the fear, learned to recognize when his anger was too perfect, too staged, learned to feel for the wrongness in the world, and slowly, steadily, he began to break out faster. By the morning of the 5th day, Naruto felt different. Not invincible, not done, but sharper. He'd gotten closer to Hinata too. Not in a dramatic way. Just small conversations, shared exhaustion, quiet moments where she didn't look like she wanted to disappear. She felt like a piece of warmth that didn't burn. He'd also grown used to mixing bits of Hyuga-style principles into his own movement. Tighter parries, cleaner angles, using an opponent's force against them. He still couldn't replicate the internal damage Hinata caused, couldn't crack that puzzle, but he developed something else instead. A new habit. Chakra reinforcement kept steady through his body. Then he added in a controlled release at the moment of impact, small bursts that made hits heavier without making them sloppy. Naruto. Kurenai's voice called out from behind him. Naruto turned, ready to begin again. But Kakashi was with her. That alone made Naruto's stomach tighten. Kakashi-sensei. Naruto asked, trying to keep it light. Are you here to watch my training? Kakashi's visible, I didn't smile this time. No. We have questions. Naruto's heartbeat kicked up. Questions meant he'd messed up, or they'd noticed something he'd been hiding. Okay, he said carefully. What's up? Kurenai's gaze stayed steady. When was the last time you slept? The question hit like a kunai in the ribs. Naruto went still. Panic rose fast, too fast, like his body remembered the feeling of being caught and judged. He couldn't lie. Not to two Jonin staring at him like that. Kakashi followed immediately, voice calm but heavy. We've been taking shifts guarding the house. Both of us noticed you leave almost immediately after everyone goes to sleep. Naruto's throat tightened. I haven't. His voice trailed off. Kurenai's frustration flared. Naruto, how could you be so irresponsible? You won't be at full strength if you don't sleep. It could put you and others. I can't. Naruto blurted, louder than he meant to. The words came out like they'd been trapped behind his teeth for years. Silence. Kurenai's expression changed first, shock, then concern. Kakashi stayed quiet, but his posture shifted subtly, like he was listening for what Naruto wasn't saying. Naruto lowered his head. His hands clenched at his sides. Please, keep this to yourselves. I'll explain everything. Kakashi spoke first, voice gentler now. Okay, Naruto. Sounds like you've been carrying something for a long time. Naruto took a shaky breath. I can't sleep, he said, forcing the truth out cleanly. Not from stress. Not because I'm worried. I just can't. I don't even remember the last time I slept. I think I was 4. Maybe 3. He swallowed, voice rough. I don't get tired either. I can be physically exhausted, sure, but I just catch my breath. That's it. I don't know why. I don't understand it. He didn't mention the foreign chakra. He didn't mention the feeling of being pushed awake. He wasn't ready. The two Jonin were silent for several seconds. Naruto's chest tightened painfully. Say something, he pleaded, voice quieter now. Please. Kakashi exhaled slowly. Sorry, he said. It's just a revelation. But I believe you. Your performance has only improved. You're not deteriorating. Kurenai nodded in agreement, still studying Naruto like she was trying to see whether he was lying to himself. But Kakashi continued, firm again. You need to inform the third Hokage. We can't assume there are no long-term consequences. Naruto's stomach twisted, but he nodded. Okay, I will. When we get back, Kurenai's tone softened. Good. The tension didn't vanish completely, but it eased, like a blade finally lowered. And with that, the subject was put on hold. For now, just like that, another day passed. Tomorrow morning would be the final showdown with Zabuza and the Hunter Ninja. It was 4 a.m. and Naruto decided to take a small rest between theory and physical exercise. He took a walk through the forest. It was peaceful. He'd learned to appreciate the nature around him. There were always things working around the clock, nocturnal animals, small bugs. It amazed him how complex this world was. He had once cursed his inability to sleep, but really it was a blessing for so much more than just training. It was mentally training, but it also helped calm him down, made him realize so many things in the silence of night. Then before he could continue, he bumped into something. Snapping himself back to reality, realizing he hadn't bumped into something, rather someone. What looked to be a woman only slightly older than him. Long brown hair coupled with deep brown eyes. Her skin was flawless too. Sorry, Naruto stumbled out. He lent a hand to the young lady and helped her up. That's okay. She responded. Do you need help? He asked. The woman tilted her head, slightly confused at what she would need help with. Naruto reiterated, those are medicinal herbs, right? I could help you find some more. I'm a ninja actually, so I could be of some help, Naruto said with a grin as he pointed to his headband. The woman's eyes widened, and she gave Naruto a small smile. That would be helpful, she replied. For the next half an hour, Naruto made small talk with the girl as he gathered various herbs. He'd done a few missions like this in the village, so he was fairly efficient at it. He learned various things about the woman. Her father was sick, so she was getting herbs to help him recover. Her name was Haku, and she had been living in the forest for most of her life. One day, she wished to live peacefully with her father. Naruto saw no lie, although it seemed like she was keeping something to herself. That made sense, of course. Why would she tell a stranger all about her life? Naruto, of course, shared some things back, like his name, the fact he was training, and that he wanted to be Hokage one day. The company was light, and the two parted ways soon after. Not without Haku dropping a bombshell on Naruto. I'm a boy, by the way, Naruto. Naruto was left stunned. He was as pretty as Hinata. Shaking his head, he forced the thought out of his mind. It was his final training session with Kurenai. Another day passed, and finally, it was the day of reckoning. The others had all learnt the tree walking exercise and had enough time to train in pairs for the final day. Naruto was silently confident. He was incomparably stronger than last week. His fighting style had completely evolved. His attacks hit several times harder with his rudimentary application of Gentle Fist. He had a lot more flow in his techniques too. He found a way to counter the Gentle Fist too. They would always aim for his chakra points, so if he could pinpoint the general area each of his chakra points where he could parry the Gentle Fist ever so slightly to make the attack miss. That was only in the event he couldn't dodge it or if he could counterattack in a more advantageous scenario. Because of this, Hinata was no longer his match, but Naruto would handicap himself. First no clones, then only fighting with parries or slipping through Hinata's guard or simply not getting hit, not using his raw strength advantage. Hinata, of course, improved as well. Her stance became more refined. She became more accurate. Her stamina increased, and she could use her Byakugan for longer. Sasuke spent his final day beating Kiba over and over. This damaged Kiba's pride immensely, but there wasn't much he could do. Shino trained with Sakura, and Sakura couldn't figure out how to even touch the young bug user. But they had all improved. Crisis often gave the best results, and what better preparation than getting ready for a deathmatch? The teams decided to split up. Team 8 would guard the house, making sure Tezuna's family couldn't be taken hostage. Naruto left a few clones to stay in the trees too for extra surveillance. Team 7, the original team sent on this mission, would protect Tezuna and fight Zabuza.